Okay. I just need to, I think the only thing I'm recording now, but I think the only thing I don't have is the title of this, so you would know what this recording is. It just says meeting with the LDAR room. Okay. All right, and I think we're good here. You're welcome. Oh, no, you're okay. We're good. And now we are off. So I wanted to take this from a perspective of, like I said, if you're sitting in the hot seat, to me, even when I used to do audits, and I guess kind of still do audits here and there, I never really liked going to audit the facility. I've enjoyed a couple of them for the most part, and the ones I do is when I really, really have to work hard to find something. Some of if it's like shooting fish in a barrel or something that's not as fun, but working with people and seeing the due diligence that they take and they go to be able to show that they're doing a good program is kind of some of the things that I like to see. So this is made up of a bunch of reasons, quite a few controversial thoughts that I would love to have audit discussion on. So as I've said before, in this conference, we talk a lot about audit proofing and keys to LDAR success and maintenance and all of that stuff, but we generally don't talk a whole lot about when we get in trouble when there's an audit via third party US EPA or some state agency. One of the reasons why we don't talk about that has everything to do with the E word. Anybody know what that E word is? Most men have it. Ego. Our egos, man, our egos. We just don't like talking about our mistakes. We don't like talking about the things that we did bad, right? So a lot of times I try to make it a point to expose those things because if we do that, that gives you guys the opportunities to learn from it and us not to be able to make the same mistake twice. So I will have to say that I did make some adjustments to these slides in the last day or so, and I'm a horrible speller, and my daughter didn't get the proofread from me. So if you see something up here, please point it out so I can catch it, and I don't do it again the next time I give it. So she does all of my Grammarly stuff and everything. So, but talking about your mistakes is generally not an option. A lot of times you're advised not to talk because, the last time, 2 years, 2 years ago, I was here and I was helping a company out in Chicago that was undergoing a consent decree. He actually was in my consent decree class, and three of the guys that would always be at this couldn't come. And they couldn't come because the agency was there and it was Region 5 and the LDAR advisor for Region 5 was going to be there and they just didn't want any, mishap, right? And if you give you a little bit of the backstory in that situation, we were almost done with the original audit that started all of this stuff to happen. And the LDAR coordinator asked a question. He said, I've been trying to understand my permit and it has this little thing in it. And it basically says that, the valves would be in the facility would operate as an NDE. And I just wanted to know what you thought about it. And in retrospect and hindsight, we all realized that that was like the biggest mistake that could have ever happened because the audit wasn't bad. The audit was going good. But the answer to that question, when they looked at it, they realized that there was only one of many things that was wrong with that permit. And that opened up a whole can of worms of all this other stuff that they looked at. And they started looking at calculations and all of that, those things, right? So it was a reason why they put that gag order on the site and wouldn't let them come. Embarrassment is another reason. So understanding and controlling that information during the course of an audit is really important. And even post the audit, understanding and controlling that information is also equally as important. But you want to make sure that you are in the loop with those things, right? A corporation will want to know what all's being done and what the auditor is asking them. And they want to be able to know the answers to those questions before these things actually happen. One misunderstood statement for sure can result in disadvantage and for cost of facilities, basically hundreds of thousands of dollars. In federal audits and in third-party audits, it can cost you findings, right? So All of these things are reasons why we try to keep this under wraps, right? But we are not. We're pulling back the wrappers. We're about to open it up, and we're going to talk about a bunch of different things. Some of it, like I said, mostly controversial, and I can't wait to get into these conversations. The corporate facility should take complete advantage of knowledge and share across the entire organization. I heard a wise man say earlier today that we kind of do things our own way, even though we have multiple facilities, we do them differently. And, there's not really a knowledge share that happens, right? There's some disadvantages to that because the biggest thing that we want to be able to do in this industry when rules will come into play and fines can come into play is learn from other people's mistakes. That, and if we have the opportunity to do that, that's good, but we can't do that if we don't really share it, right? So there's knowledge and insights that you lose, and then there's a lot of language, a lot of understanding or experiences that get lost in translation. One of the funny things that I think that happens in audits is that, because we do have these knowledge shares, then we're able to combat things that don't get combated always. It frustrates me in the third party audit that you can read a finding that is not a finding. And when it gets to your site and you argue that it's not a finding, but then the next site he goes to in the same organization, he writes that same thing up as a finding because they didn't challenge it. How is that a good audit report? You think you would want to do better, right? But one of the ways to be able to do that is to not let them divide and conquer us and stay together as a group as we move forward. So I always kind of like to qualify myself or why I'm up here. Number one, I would like to say that I'm very grateful and privileged to have the opportunity, being able to do this for as many years as I have, and to have even one person show up today is like for me a blessing because, from where I started in life and to where I am now, it's just a big difference. But in that time frame, I have had a chance to work with the Department of Justice in the inner chambers in Washington, D.C., negotiating on consent decrees, looking at how they conducted audits, what their methodology was. And then I've had a chance to work on the other side of the fence. It was always a very funny sight. I'll tell you this story too. This is very true. So this was a case out of Orangeburg, and it was funny because my consent decree class I did early today, they were there, but I wasn't on their side. I was working for the Department of Justice at the time, right? So that was basically writing the reports, demonstrating, doing economic benefit, going through the whole thing. And the gentleman's name is Carl Fingerhood. He's a U.S. DOJ attorney. And he said, working with you, I know I'm making a deal with the devil, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, why are you saying that? He says, we were talking about all this information, and I went in so cheap. It should have been like a dead giveaway, right? Because I was basically $150 an hour. And normally this rate should be about $350 an hour, right? And so they're getting this deal, you working, and he says, I know that you got ulterior motives for doing this. And I'm like, yes, I do. I mean, you're getting a good product from me and good information from me, but I'm also getting to observe all of this, right? And I do want to just make us better prepared for you guys the next time that we ever have to meet. And all of my clients, I want to be able to do that for. So we get through that whole process. It was a good job. My rebuttal and explanation of what they did wrong was agreed to by the judge because they have another guy writing something that's saying probably something opposite of what I'm saying. And so I get to AFPM and I write an abstract. You submitted to a guy and it was called Back from the Lion's Den or something like that, right? Insights on Department of Justice, whatever, right? And I submitted that on a Monday, and on a Wednesday, Carl Fingerhood called me, right? And he said, no, bro, you can't talk about that. And I'm like, oh, what? Hey, how do you know that I wrote that? How do you know that I wrote that? And he's like, hey, we have our methods and we have our means. He says, I still have you technically under contract right now. And as long as you're under contract, you can't talk, right? And that lasted for another 2. Finally, I was able to change the name up a little bit or made it less obvious what I was talking about. But but in the end, yeah, learning from them, it really was a good eye-opening site of things that so many things we used to worry about that I'm like, no, we don't have to worry. We're not going to fight this person because this person, they don't matter in this situation. And we'll talk about those things as we get along with it, right? It also helped me to be able to recognize, prosecution strategies from the inside, increase understanding of the legal system in the steps that are involved in it, and pitfalls from mistakes that facilities have made during the litigation process. I've also helped multiple facilities across the United States negotiate terms with the various EPA regions and state agencies. Sharing is caring, so I just gave you the Orangeburg story. There's another one in Mount Bellevue. I talked about this in my earlier class today too, but it's probably worth repeating because that was very interesting. Basically, we all want to be responsible care partners. When we turn our Title V's in and we got to put deviations down, we don't want to not put everything down, right? So, but sometimes we can be a little overzealous in how we categorize our mistakes or our findings, right? So in this case, we did definitely do that. They did do that. And then TCQ took note and started asking a lot more questions. And then and then the guy who had actually reported all this stuff, it was like 3 or 4 years ago. So he had 2 years of these bad reports 3 or 4 years ago. And now they're asking a whole new group of people that don't know nothing about what he reported, the information, right? So I ended up with a stack of papers that were probably about this tall of data, right? And we had to comb through and find out what did he tell them that they did. And then from telling them what they did, what really happened and how do we, we mitigate that. I personally like to call that rule bending. Like it's the rule, you have it in there, but how we interpret it makes all the difference. And one of the things we were able to do is like, they said, oh, in this unit, we had 72,000 connectors that we missed monitoring on. Well, when you go back and do the count, there was unions, there were T's, there were elbows, there were in there. Elbow was in the database as 3 connection points, but technically, or 2 connection points, I'm sorry. It's one elbow. It's 1 T, not 3 different connection points. Now we do have 3 leak interfaces to monitor, but 1 T, right? So when we went back and just took that one little change, it took probably 70%, 65, 70% of the counts went down by that much, and that was a huge move in the right direction as far as what they were going to pay for a fine. I mean, I felt like I wanted a bonus off of that or something because I'm like, what you were going to pay versus that's real money. Now you're not paying that amount, right? And at the time I was working with Baker and Botts on the strategies for that. But learning those different types of things, there's always a tip or a trick that you can bring. We had a example out of Tulsa, Oklahoma area, and there was these guys that he was a supervisor too, which really is disappointing. But a supervisor decided not to do his job the right way, and even more frustrating, it was cooling towers. Now, nothing will make an LDAR manager more upset than for us to hand you a good job and have you basically crap on it, for lack of better words. When you are doing method 21 monitoring, you already know if it's cold and I get out in the tank farm, I'm gonna get my behind handed to me because it's gonna be that wind blowing and everything. If it's hot and I gotta climb up on this fin fan, as soon as I get my head above the fin fan, that hot wind is just gonna be blowing on me. These things suck. They're not stuff you just wanna go do every day. But when I am on the ground all day long around cooling towers, it don't matter whether it's 90 degrees. When you're around the cooling tower, all that water coming down, it feels cool. It's a good job. Why would you cheat that? If I give you carbon canisters to monitor, all the carbon canisters are on the ground. You don't climb all up in a place with carbon canisters. And you just checking, like you either have an analyzer where you're checking for benzene or you have an analyzer where you're checking for total VOC. But in any event, you got 2 points to check every canister for the most part, and you might have 30 or 40 canisters. It's 3 hours of really good work. When those things get cheated, it's like, what is this world coming to? This is why that dog is out there sniffing stuff, because at least it's going to sniff it and it's not going to cheat, So this guy decided that he was going to cheat the cooling towers, not for 1 month, not for 2 months. He cheated it for a year and a half. A year and a half. And finally, his technicians got so fed up with the disparity that they were the ones that actually came clean. Now, anybody here know how to write a deviation report for a year and a half of cooling towers not getting done? I promise you, that's just not what you say. You got to say it, but there's a way that you say it. And so you guys are here earlier. Andrew Gunn is absolutely a genius. When he and I worked together, man, we created some really beautiful things, right? And one of the things he did in this situation is I know what it should look like. I'm a pie in the sky guy. I'm an idea man, but he's the one that actually goes into the dungeon and flips the light switches and puts water in the beakers and, smokes his pipe or whatever he's doing and comes up with the actual application. We built a module for the cooling tower test with charts and graphs, because I like charts and graphs if you don't know. And it basically showed the test that he took so that we can, within a reasonable doubt, prove which ones we believed we had confidence that he did versus which ones we had confidence that he didn't do. And with that, and the way he set that chart up, if you guys ever talk to him again or whatever, you ask him for a copy of it or whatever, we were able to even develop or come up with what the environmental impact assessment was on that particular item, right? And it was so good that the lawyer that we were working with, his boss got mad at him and said, "You ramrodded these guys into doing that. I want to talk to them about this." They wouldn't let me get on the phone. This was a conference call or whatever, and they wouldn't let, the guy's name is Derek, but they wouldn't let him talk, right? It was just my chemical engineer and Andrew, right? And the data. What they didn't know it was the chart. We knew we wanted to keep the chart in our back pocket. So Derek had the chart. That's what we brought out. We had our conclusions from and everything, right? So when the lawyers came to talk to us, which is the people that's technically on our team, right? So they come over to talk to us. I'm not even on the phone. I'm just sitting by the phone, waiting, like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? When Andrew broke out that chart and he started explaining it to them, and then their eyes were able to see how we drew those conclusions, it made it an even better win-win. And then the agency in turn told their legal team that we were working for, this was a best-in-class response and a gold standard, right? So those are the kind of things that we can do when we put our minds to it and when we share information like what we're about to talk about. So you're getting into an audit. It's happening. You're not going to get around it. You're there. It's day one. We talk about the book. In my other presentation earlier, some of these things are going to be similar, and then we're going to divide into agency audit versus third-party audit. But this is the same no matter what. So, question to the group: what is the book? I had to pick on you, sir, the purple shirt. What is the book? Any idea? There's no wrong answers in this room. Idea. All right. So during an audit, I'm gonna tell you, that guy walks in, they are not gonna walk in empty-handed. They will have something to take notes with. So if he has a Nomax on, then number one place to pick that book is just slide it right here, against our belly, So we're climbing, we got it. It's not, if we don't have a Nomex on and we have shirt and pants on, then the number one place is to just stick it right here, right? You want that thing to stay stuck there all day. Why? Why do we want it to stay stuck there all day? If he takes it out, what is he about to do? Yeah, and is he ever gonna write something down that's good for us? No. Sometimes. In the third party. In the agency audit, they're not writing anything down that's good for us, right? There are some knowledge shares and some best practices in third party, but we'll get into that. So you want to minimize whatever goes out in that book, right? Because in the agency situation, which we're kind of talking about right now, those unanswered questions will almost always go to findings. And we're trying to avoid the findings, right? So you're preparing for this audit and you're in the audit, you want to avoid the findings. And man, it's so much better to answer today, the answers and questions as opposed to tomorrow. Because if you don't address them in this situation with this type of audit, your response might not come from the EPA or even your state agency till several months later. It could be, I've seen it be as long as a year and a half. And then when they write back to you, it's a FOV or NOV, depending on who it's coming from. And now you have to do a whole nother response. That's way more expensive because you got attorney's fees, the legal team I'm working with right now out of Denver, Colorado area. I mean, I definitely wasted my life away when I was a kid because their rates are somewhere between $700 and $1,000 an hour, and I'm like, oh my God. But they're very necessary, and without them, they'll be paying several million more than what they're about to pay right now. But you're still we can avoid as LDAR people in the game on the front lines. If we prepare right now, we can avoid having to deal with those type of things during an LDAR audit because we can answer those questions right up front and not let the book get thick with information that we didn't answer or that we avoided. I said earlier on Wednesday, that it's the ostrich effect. We never ever want to have the ostrich effect. Anybody have an idea what that is? Ostrich gets scared. What do they say that they normally do? They stick their head in the sand. Like you stick your head in the sand, you're down here, like it's nothing's happening, nothing's happening. But in reality, everything is happening around you, and you are just letting it, and it's building a case that you're gonna have to fight at some point, right? You've been through some audits, my man. So you have closeout meetings at the end of the day? And are they driven by you or are they driven by the client or by the auditor? Mm-hmm. So I would ask for us to at least be able to hold the shift. If you're not holding the steering wheel and you at least want to narrow down, because they'll tell you what they found and they'll give you an overlay, but you really want to paint them in a corner. At the end of the day, me as an auditor, if I'm auditing you, every time I ask you a question, that's a paint stroke, and that's a paint stroke, and another paint stroke, and another paint stroke. And eventually, where you at? You're in a corner. You're in a corner. And you can't, and now when I give you the real question of what I want to ask you, you got to tell me what I want to know. And if you say anything else, it incriminates all the other stuff you said when I was paint stroking you into that corner. So at the end of the day, this is your chance to erase, right? What do you have as findings right now? That's a question that we're allowed to ask during an audit. What do you have as findings right now? If they say they have a finding, we think this is a finding, where is it regulatory that is wrong? Show me in the regulations that is wrong. How do you come up to this conclusion? If you do that every day, there shouldn't be a surprise at the end of the week. At the end of the week, we should be golden because, we already know what's going to happen. My best and worst audit experience, Detroit, Michigan at the Marathon Refinery. And I had a guy, his name was Nino. I can't remember his last name. Nino he really stuck it to us. Anybody know Matthew Gobert? Matthew Gobert? He's my business partner, or was my business partner for a very long time. Well, back then we were with a company called ARI Environmental, and the lady called us. Her name was Honor Shear. She's the HSE manager now at that facility, and she says, "I don't think your technician is here." And so we get up there, and that fool is nowhere to be found. It is 3 days before the end of the month. We got 8,000 components left to monitor, and we're trying to get all hands on deck. Now, if he wasn't there for that whole month, how much work do you think he was really doing when he was, whether we knew he was there or not? Not a whole lot. So when we were doing these 8,000 components, that was just this much of a much bigger problem. So we had to disclose how big of a problem it was, right? And we told Honor what was going on and what we were going to do to fix it. And one of us was going to be there the entire time. I mean, we were there for Thanksgiving, for Christmas. I took Christmas. Matt took Thanksgiving, like week after week with a new crew, like helping us just get this problem fixed. Because at this point, our reputation is on the line. And if you don't know anything about LDAR, what you should know is once you mess up, you messed up. Like you don't really get do-overs. Like they see that guy, oh, that's the guy that, or you're the company that, you don't want that. So we were fighting against that. Her plant manager basically told her, like, why are you working with these guys? Why haven't we fired them? And she said, I believe in them, and there's something about them that I think we should just give them a chance. I mean, we are all the way up here in Detroit. They're all the way down there in Texas. This anybody could have not shown up, and we'll see what happens. If it doesn't work, and so she says, this is what I'll do. We have to have an audit. It's a consent decree audit. So that audit is coming, and we're going to have it in, I think it was like February or beginning of March, right? And so while we were there for Thanksgiving and Christmas and working, because we were in there fixing all that crap that was messed up, and she would see stuff sometimes, and she'd be like, "Hey, I was in such and such unit, and I found some stuff. You want me to give it to you?" And I'm like, "No, because if I do my job right, I should catch it anyway, right?" So and then I go out there and spend a whole extra day for looking for stuff because I didn't want her to, feel a certain kind of way. So we fast forward, and does anybody know Buzz Harris? Okay, so Buzz Harris was a guy coming to do the audit, like Mr. LDAR himself. So Matt and I looking at each other like, because we know we did our job, but you don't know what you don't know. And so, he comes in, like, for example, we don't know what 3 units he's about to pick to go through. You have no idea, right? He's going to tell us which ones he wants. He picked a tank form. Tank form is always scary because it's all spread out and blah, blah, blah. And then you walk through so many other units while you're doing a tank form. So you got visuals of left and right and everything, right? But anyway, fast forward past that, he does his audit, we do our thing, and we weren't privy to this. Closeout meetings every day, we were sitting in another room. We were only privy to the very last one. And, we were sitting there side by side with each other, and the plant manager, the same one that said they should have fired us, was in the room, right? And so Buzz says, yeah, the work was pretty good, and they've done a decent job, and plant manager's like, well, I don't know what pretty good means. And he says, well, it's probably one of the, top 5 or 6, programs I've looked at it, whatever. And he's like, top 5 or 6 out of what? And he says, well, I mean, the last 2 years, I probably audited over 160 some facilities. And at that point, I cannot even begin to express to you the amount of relief that came over my body and his body, and the whole thing. And then Honor, I remember, I'll never forget to this day, when she looked at us and we looked at her and she winked her eye at us like, you guys did it or whatever, right? And we've had that program, like I say they've had that program ever since, and it really taught me a really big lesson about how you can't let these things slip away. Now, in that same audit, I worked to 2 or 3 o'clock every morning because when they left, that was just a start for me to go and check this and check that and grab operators and go walk through this area, go put this plug in, do this. Like we worked our butts off during that audit, but we got past it. And we learned we don't ever want to be in that situation again. So how do we not be in that situation again? If you're trying to prepare for an audit, when do you prepare for the audit? That's an open question. So I will choose a guy with the cool ass glasses. The shades, you, sir, yes. When do you prepare for audit? Yeah, great answer. Now, not a week before the audit, not 2 weeks for the audit. Audit prep, it should be a figure of speech, right? It's not a link. Now, mind you, we're probably still going to do it just because, crazy things happen. You want to still do it. But he's right. It started yesterday. Your audit prep should always be. We believe strongly in daily, weekly, monthly, semi-annual. These are all KPIs, key performance indicators. What are my daily key performance indicators? One would be, how much time did these guys spend in the field? You were telling me earlier that you run that report in LeakDOS and it tells you kind of what the time on tools are, right? So you at least know they were in the field on this machine. All right, so then a weekly report would be, okay, well, I generally average this many leaks a year, divided by 52. That's how many leaks I should have a month. And that's a real simple indicator. And this week, instead of having the 24 leaks I normally have, I only have 7. All right, so which week are you going to audit? You're going to audit the week with 7 or the next week that had 35? I mean, and obviously that's not saying that you're going to find something, but it does help you limit where you're looking and make you look smarter, not just look harder and work for nothing, right? So we have to focus on the content of what's written in that book, because anything that's written in that book is going to end up being a fine. So no matter whether you're doing a third-party audit or you're doing the agency audit, you want to be paying attention to what they're paying attention to, which is why we talked about doing the clarification at the end of every day. So there's no surprises at the end of the week. I mean, if Buzz would have said that it was a bad audit, we would have been toast. If we would have not, I mean, he literally held that contract in his hands, and I'm going to talk about the differences in that in a couple of slides from now. So, and if you guys got any questions or then feel free. I love audience participation. I'm going to engage you if you don't engage me anyway. So go ahead.
Friday, guy just what showed up? Like, was he a
Yeah.
member of the team?
He was a guy on our team. He was a technician that we hired to train to be supervisor. And he was, we were paying him. I mean, he wasn't no call. He was no calling and no showing. So we thought he was there, but he was turning in timesheets like he was coming to work. So he was essentially stealing from us. And yeah, when you have a one-man site, it's your most dangerous thing that can happen. You better do something to make. So now we got all kind of stuff, or I say we. I should explain that. So well, obviously Brian Whitley. My company is WH Consulting, but for 20-something years I worked with Matthew Gobert. We were business partners together, made partner with EMSI. EMSI was bought out by Alliance, and so I decided to branch off into a couple other things that I like doing, like consent decree stuff and green energy type things and stuff like that. So I'm in that direction. So I'm in a little bit of every time I've ever done this, I've done it with them. So you'll hear me say we or us, and you saw it from the previous thing, like we've been through the trenches together. So there's no love lost there. We're like four flats on a Cadillac. So that guy he was robbing us blind. And someone, I think one of the maintenance guys came in to check on, I don't even know why he came in there, but it was dusty in there. It was, it was no evidence that guy had been there that month at all. And when we looked at the data, it wasn't, which also kind of gives you the idea that data in an isolated situation where you got a 1 or 2 man show, then you better be looking at that data every day. If he's the only one that has access to the data, you are setting yourself up for failure. We had it happen in a pharmaceutical facility, and that was almost 3 months that the guy was gone, and it would have cost us severely if it wasn't a quarterly project. And we went in there the last 2 or 3 weeks when we figured out what was going on and had a whole bunch of stuff to do. And we were able to clean it up and move it forward. But a lot of times that's where like our expertise kind of comes in. So the absolute worst one that I ever had was a guy who had basically cheated for an entire year. He had over 10,000 monitoring events that he did not do. And we did not know. This fool only had, like, when you looked at the times that he'd go in and out the plants, for the whole year, he had less than 15 hours in that plant the entire year. You know how many, so rule bending, it's a Han facility, and it was recently under a consent decree. And the consent decree required replacements at 100 ppm. And fortunately, we replaced everything that leaked over 100 ppm with low E valves. So what were my leak rates? Low. And Han had skip periods. And the skip periods in Han allowed me to not have had to do those connectors. So my fine wasn't I didn't do the monitoring. My fine was that I didn't report to you that I was going to skip those periods and go annually. You know how much money that saved us? Yeah. So that's the kind of thing. And I like doing those kind of things. I like those problems or trying to solve them, right? So as we talked earlier, and I advised you, those daily meetings, our LDAR audit tool, number one that we want to remember is try to control that narrative. There's one way you can say, like, I'm paying for this audit, blah, 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 but they have a legal obligation to report fairly and honestly and whatever, right? So you want to respect their craft and what they're doing, but you also want to make sure that you're in a little bit of control of what's happening, So for example, this is debatable topic number one. You're a facility and you monitor valves. Do you monitor the plugs with the valve? Used to, but you don't anymore? You monitor the plugs with the valve? Do you monitor the plugs with the valve? If it's attached to the body, yes. So the plug is literally screwed into the valve, then you do monitor them, right? What rule? I'm gonna pick a rule. Let's just say we're using NSPS VV or VVA, GG or GGG or GGGA, or Quad O or Quad OA, right? Any one of those. Are the plugs required to be monitored? You say yes. How many yeses I have and how many no's I have? I have a couple of yeses. Yep. Either 3 yeses.
The plug or the body?
Yeah, so yeah, there's a question, and it's an age-old question, right? And it's been answered in a applicability index, ADI. Yeah, so and a plug is not a connection. So, because it doesn't meet the definition of a connector, and therefore it does not have to be monitored, right? But if you're not monitoring the plugs, then are you going to let your auditor monitor them? So here's my question. We do monitor the plugs with the valves because they can leak, and it's a best practice. But when the auditor comes in to me and says, well, we're going to monitor, I don't tell him that I monitor the plugs of the valves. I tell him we monitor the valves according to method 21, and you can monitor the valves according to method 21. So method 21 doesn't require the plugs to be monitored with the valve. So he can't monitor the plugs with the valve. Am I cheating?
If you have to monitor any leak in it, that doesn't matter.
So you can monitor the valve body, but the valve body should be. So if you have flanges on either side of the valve, they will be identified as connections because they're connecting two pieces of the valve.
And plus, when the flange is built onto the valve,
Mhm.
how is it not part of the valve?
That's a connector, that is a true connector.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's a plug, it's not a connector, it's not connecting anything.
So by that ADI, the plug does not exist with the leak interface, and you never have to monitor it. You can never be fined for not monitoring it or not reporting leaks because the EPA has said it does not exist. There's no.
Right. It is a best practice. It is a best
Do
practice.
you count those leaks as valve leaks?
Yes, I do.
See, we used to do it,
Mhm.
and Buzz is the one that came in
Mhm.
and said, you guys are overinflating your valve leak rates.
Yeah.
We're counting all these plug
Mhm.
leaks as valve leaks. We stopped monitoring them. Now we count them as connector leaks.
And so I always laugh when those statements are made because, okay, so if we overinflate our leak rates on our valves, what's the worst? Let's talk about the worst things that can happen. First worst thing that can happen is we can bust some kind of leak percentage, and now we're doing more frequent monitoring. And that's if you're skipping periods or something like that, right? But the only other thing that can happen as a result of that is that we have higher emissions that we're reporting at the end of the year, and if we can bust our potential to emit. If you do that based on plugs, besides that, you're also fixing them. Like that shouldn't happen at all. You should have a buffer in there where you would never see your potential to emit, right? So now the only person it's to benefit for is the auditor himself. Because when the auditor comes in and I'm trying to find leaks, I'm trying to match your leak percentages, or I'm just trying to I should be just trying to do an honest audit. That is not how it's gonna happen. Because there are psychological issues with us, myself included, when we go to do an audit. Example number one, this is a valve, this is a valve, this is a valve, this is a valve, and this is a valve. And I look at that and I see all 4 of these valves. This valve has wires hanging off of it. What does that mean? It has leaked before. Now, as the auditor, how guilty do I feel not choosing that valve, knowing that I only got to choose one of the 4? If I purposely go choose this valve, I feel guilty. But if I choose the valve that's leaking, I have just kind of screwed you, bro. So I've looked my whole life for ways to balance that out. And one of the ways I balance it out is I monitor connections, not connections, plugs with the valve that go against the valve leak percentages, but I never let an auditor monitor plugs against me because it's not required.
He ain't never matching your.
No, he's not, and they never have. They've never matched my leak rates ever. I've always been better than them on every single unit for any one of my facilities that they've ever done. So, and that's how I try to make it fair,
But is that really making it fair? So.
Oh, it's not fair. I told you this is gonna be a controversial discussion. But go ahead, finish your thought.
No, I mean, you can't go that way.
Yeah, it's not. But go ahead. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. A ding for finding a leak that, what state are you in? Yeah, I don't even remember Louisiana having a requirement for, because Texas do have some requirements for fin plugs to be monitored. So what was his actual, so he was a LDEQ? Okay, so then he would have had to serve you like a complaint where he says that you violated X. What did he say was the actual violation, and where did he point in the regulations?
Well, more of a, he found the leak, right,
Mm-hmm.
and came back and passed.
Right.
So, it wasn't a,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, he was,
Yeah. Inconvenience, a big inconvenience. So there's a way for us to equalize that. Secret number two. And that is whatever they're monitoring, keep track of what they're monitoring, the components that leaked and the components that didn't leak. For the purpose of, at the end, if they have a 7% leak rate and you have that unit traditionally has like a 2% or 1.5%, you'll over the three times multiplier, and now you're in trouble. But if you kept track of everything they monitored, you can filter your database out on just those same components. And what happens if you had a 6.5% leak rate on the exact same components that he had? And I have had that happen to me at least once or twice. And
typically they're just.
they're clicking, but you're writing the numbers down. You have to, like first of all, I said it in my previous thing on Wednesday, but this is not a zone defense. This is man to man. If they bring 3 men in, you better have three, and they better not be technicians. Like three, like if you bring your guys in, I don't care if that dude's $100 an hour, pay whatever you need to pay, especially when it's the agency, because this is your one time. You got one time, man, one time to get this right. So have them come in, and that guy, yeah, he knows exactly. He's got his own book. I'm writing down every tag number that he's writing, and then we get all the numbers back. We give it to our data processor. She queries that stuff out and comes in. I can even show them, like I ran a report where I can show them how many times those individual components they found leaked. Do you know what your legal team can do with that whenever they're sitting down? We have just changed our litigation risk, and that's big. That's big. That helps a lot. Let's try to control a narrative. LDAR audit must do number 2. Verify all work performed by third party or enforcement agents. M21 should be verified by one of your machines. Why? I had to choose the man with the best hair. You right there, bro. I say that because I'm very envious of you. I actually hate you because you got really good hair. You gotta keep your apples to apples. What happens if we just let them tell us what leaked and we don't verify them? Any idea? I have never, ever, ever done it and not pull leaks that they have found off. Because there's different things they'll do. They'll come in and they'll see the valve and they'll be monitoring, and it like might hit 503 once for a split second, and the definition is 500. And so he's like, oh, it's a leak. Well, it's dissipated, some air is blown, whatever. We go, man, I can only get it to like 367. And he's like, no, man, it's right here. You can't get it. Okay, all right, that's it. And now time is not on the side because we spent 8 minutes on this one valve with teeter totter between. He knows he has to get moving, right? So let's
Yeah,
go.
where you want to go.
Exactly,
Yeah.
he lets it go. Or they do this BS stuff where, okay, this is the valve. You guys get the demonstration. This is a valve. He's like monitoring it, like, just all this, right? Like you all cupping it like that. So can you really argue with them? No, you just let him walk away. You go back and you're like, man, I can't get a leak on that, And if this guy is kind of like not a nice guy, then tell his boss. There's one other remonitor I really want to get remonitored. I got the no one session, nobody worked on it, but we are not getting the same reading. And I appreciate if you come out and the boss is not going to come out the same, right? That's not fair. Are we supposed to monitor that way? We are wanting to know what is leaking to the atmosphere. So if I'm looking at what's leaking to the atmosphere, I'm not gonna get it by holding it in, right? So that's the second way. In every single audit ever, we've always been able to take 1, 2, 3 leaks off that way.
Is there a sequence of EPA monitors and then you monitor?
Yes, only for the leaks. If they don't find a leak. Yeah. No. If they monitor it, and then the other thing too is like pay real close attention to the midday and when they do their drift or whatever, right? So if they're drifting high, like so for example, when he puts it on and he checks it, his 500 is going to 597. That makes a difference. Keep track of that because that'll help you. Like we're this. Yeah, I don't like to play fair, as you can tell. Teach you guys how not to play fair. So it does allow for instant clarifications of the leaks found. It makes the agency really sure whether or not he's capturing a leak. They can't do that cupping technology. They can't do these things that they do to try to, make their lives easier and our lives harder. And then we can make sure that we're in sync every day with what issues were found and what the end result is. Like I said, if you're dealing with somebody who, sometimes you're going to have that person that really has an attitude because they know they don't have the same amount of experience that you have. I know you've had to deal with that, right? And so when they detect it, then what do? Like all their defenses go up, and you're not going to be able to, don't even engage that guy or girl. Like don't engage them. Let them do what they do and then talk to the other person that's with them. Right. And if there's not another person with them and the head guy's like that, yeah, you probably should call me. Because you're going to have to go over their head. But when the audit report is written, there's actually something we can do about that. So I will talk to you about it. I told you this, this is a good story. The duct tape, I didn't tell you about the duct tape. So this is Region 5 in Chicago, and it's the National LDAR advisor for the entire country is auditing my facility, right? And we're there, and he walks up to this one valve. It's probably a 12-inch valve. And for some reason, this site, it's an oil and gas facility, has duct tape around the bonnet. I don't know why they got that duct tape around the bonnet. And he's like, I can't do proper method 21 on this valve. I need it. And he goes to try to take the duct. I said, wait. Let's just talk about this for a second. I mean, what we are interested in is what's leaking out to the atmosphere. I know that the duct tape probably shouldn't be there. We need to probably work on it or whatever, but we have addressed this valve like this, and we want to know if it is leaking to the atmosphere. So I feel comfortable moving around the bonnet and checking everywhere. And if there's some elevator reading, now we got a problem. But if there's no elevator reading, then we should be okay. And he looked at it and he didn't say anything for like 20 seconds. Just looked at me like, because he was trying to find a way to pull that duct tape off. And so he's like, okay, fine, but this isn't how it's supposed to be. Now, after he left, we took every piece of duct tape off any valve. He saw that in one situation, and then he saw some over-insulated components, which he did cite us for, over-insulating the components, but he only saw like 6. When we did the final reckoning of that whole situation, it was like 300 and some components. But fortunately for us, like we were able to navigate through that situation, and we only got cited for 6. So, and not the duct tape. Yeah, see, that's so disadvantageous because the moment he pokes that hole, now you've basically created almost a vacuum type situation. It's not fair. Not fair. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We had a scenario with the valves, they were built in blocks. The valve and the packaging,
Yeah.
everything is underwater. You walk up to, you gotta get the water. So I agree that we probably should, but right now, same scenario.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
And they ended up writing it up as a supplemental, like we should always have those pumped out.
No. Why am I saying no? If the valve is underwater, yes, that is a proven methodology in test methods and procedures. I don't even have to method 21. I could actually snoop every single one of them. This is 24-hour snoop. Why would I remove this water? Now, real story. when I was a technician, young, had hair like that guy back there, and I was skinny. I had these boots on, and the boots were probably up to here, monitoring ExxonMobil chemical plant in their tank form. It's IP, I think they call it an IPAC, but it's isopropyl alcohol. Yeah, that's how you pronounce it. And so I'm walking really slow because the water is like up in here, and I have to monitor. So I'm monitoring my valve is clearly not underwater, and I hear. I'm in the plant. It's kind of loud in the plant, so for me to hear that, I'm feeling a little weird, you know. And so another again, and I'm looking, what is that noise, you know? And sure enough, I see like over here, right on the side of the tank, and this tank's got water up, like I said, probably this deep. And I got these rubber boots on and everything, and I go over to it, and I stick my probe right there. And the next thing it popped up. This is how long ago when I was monitoring. ODA. Does anybody know what ODA is? ODA 101. So it had the whole monologue needle on it and everything, and I'm holding it there. And man, when that bubble popped up, it killed the machine. Like it blew it completely out. I'm like, I am not in the right place, right? But that was an interesting find. So we were able to report it, and then obviously we had to drain that and take that out. So, but water, yeah, I wouldn't have let him. Yeah. Well, but he wrote it up as a supplemental. It's not a finding, though.
Just a supplemental.
Yeah, sometimes you got to give them something, you know. It is true.
We had a couple more buried in sand.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Sand, the waters.
And I understand that. The thing that
Can't really argue about the sand.
the sand was because the sand is not, you know, it can breathe and you can get through leaks in the sand, and I understand that. But we have some rules that say that if we have it insulated, it's exempt. So I'm like, well, there is no congruency there between I'm getting written up as a citation for over insulating a component, but then there are some rules that say if you have, you know, if it's insulated, it's.
How do you get over it?
It means that if I cover up, please. So this originated in Dalton, Michigan, and what happened was they were going through and they were monitoring, and random pieces of insulation is not by any valve. They're getting high backgrounds of 30 or 40 or whatever, right? And then they go and they try to find it and they're locating and trying, and then they get to a crease in the insulation and the reading is like 900. And then they start checking a lot of the insulation and they come to find out like, oh, there's leaks that's not getting, they're coming out in little places all over the place, but they're really big leaks that are insulated at the places where we should be able to test to catch it. Because this isn't where the leak was, it's all the way over here at this valve. And this valve is insulated, so now it doesn't come out this way because it's got all the stuff is covered up and it's traveling to a leak is always going to travel to take the least path of resistance. And that was the least path of resistance. And that is how they ended up saying, okay, if we can't get to the packing or the bonnet, then you have over insulated that component and you must make a way for us to be able to do it. That was that consent decree, and and then obviously following that, we've had a lot of other examples where they've taken that stance. So, yeah, I said you observe and take notes. This is particularly the case in the agency. We talked about trying to control the narrative. You gain an underlying element of control here. So if I'm telling you to take notes on what happened in the audit, how are we getting some level of control to what's going on? The hint is that it could be 12 months, 15 months, 8 months before they ever reply and let you show what they think they found, right? What you gonna be doing 15 months from now? What you gonna be doing 12 months from now? Like you won't be thinking about what this was, but if you take notes on this information and then it comes back in your face, you can go right back to this. No, yeah, this is what happened. We did this. And when you're sitting down talking to the legal team about the occurrence of it, it's not all recollection. And you don't know what you write down that might be actually some fire that guy or girl, depending on what lawyer you have, is working with. And that makes all the difference in the world. So yes, you take notes too. Each information that you record, like I said, becomes a leverage point for your legal team. So the summation of number 2, LDAR audit must do number 2 is no trust, all verify. Verify all their leaks, verify what they say, make them show you regulatory why something is a finding, Because I've seen several audits where things were written as findings that were not findings, and they were the final copy. Crazy. Bring the big guns to the show. There was a guy I tried very desperately to get him to come in, because when he's one of those guys that like he's wearing a polo shirt like he's going to play golf or whatever, but it fits him more like a muscle t-shirt or whatever. I mean, he like, so I would say these aren't the guns I'm talking about, but everybody would be like, yeah, we know those are the guns you're talking about. But that guy, yeah, I was like, I want you to come in and just for this one slide and just give me a pose, because apparently you wake up working out. You got muscles in your toes. So when we say bring big guns to the show, who are we talking about? Yes, we're talking about the Aarons, we're talking about the Joes, we're talking about the Buzzes, we're talking about whoever you're using as a contractor. If you don't know who their top 5 is, you're making a mistake. If you got a contractor, what's their top 5? And I will let them tell me. And then when they tell me who their top 5 is, somebody like you validate that stuff. Ask them a few questions, see what they know, because they might not be your top 5, but in any event, you want to know who that group is. And once you know who that group is, when the audit comes, hey, and if there ain't a plan for it already, y'all go home and make a plan, right? Because you just like you said, it can come with a lot of moments notice. These days, a lot of times they're nice enough from a safety standpoint to call you on a Thursday or Friday and say they're going to be there on a Monday. That's enough time for us to get our guys there. I've had yes. I mean, there was times that we had to drive all night to get to a place to work with just to see, because we want to know before. And interesting story, true story. All of my stories are true. We find out on Thursday that the audit is coming. So we pull a team together on Friday, and it's the Midwest. We drive there on Saturday. A month before we got there, they made adjustments to their analyzers, and they added these, like the valve that they screwed in was spraying in the operator's face, right? So it's an analyzer. Think about a pressure instrument, a level instrument, a temperature, any one of those. You have a DP cell. Everybody know what a DP cell is? It's basically differential pressure cell is where how you read a pressure transmitter or a level, whatever, like if you're monitoring either side of it. So imagine a piece of metal that's got a disc in it and it's closed together and screwed in like in 4 bolts right here or there, whatever, right? So on the back side of it, you have to be able to bleed it to take it out of service. So you put a plug in it, and the plug has one plug, but then there's another little valve that you can turn. And that little valve, so it looks like a plug with a little bitty smaller plug on the outside of it, and that turns in and out, okay? So those are screwed in. It's not an open-ended line because you got a plug in there, right? And whenever you need to take it out of a service and you work on it, you screw in the bigger one, the smaller one, I'm sorry, and as it goes in, then it releases pressure so that you can take it out without, so somebody's got something in their face. Okay, I got it. So they put these hooks on them, and now the hooks come down and there's no double block on it, right? So without the double block, it became an instant open-ended line. There were 170 of them. We find out on Saturday at about 11:30. So all day Sunday, because the EPA is showing up on Monday, we're literally replacing all of these things and going back to the ones that we had in there before. So they went down, I guess what they did is they took out that valve completely, they horseshoed it down, and then put another little bitty valve on it without a plug or anything. So now it's an open-ended line. 100 and something of them. Open-ended lines can run $7,000 a piece.
That I count those 170 as opening lines for this line.
Heck no, we fixed them. Yeah, we did. All right, so in LDAR terms, we always say the technicians can make the suggestion that this might be the situation, but the operator will be the final say on whether it was or not, because we are not going to go upstream or downstream and see if it's blocked somewhere further upline or downline. And that gives you a little bit of plausible deniability as to where we think this is a good practice to put this thing back this way. But we're not the final decision because we're not an operator. We haven't been officially trained in process technology, blah, 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 blah. So that's our official stance.
It's not true OEL, if it's not past 72 hour review, so we don't know the timeline on it.
Yes, I've never heard that before. Have you heard it, Aaron?
Well, I mean, I think it's just NSS. I mean,
Oh, okay.
So, you know,
Yeah.
so if a plug is out for 24-hour one day, it should be OEL. At what period of time is it OEL?
Yeah, that's a big gray area.
It is a gray area.
That's in my mind, I'm always thinking 72, and I think.
Mhm.
Actually, I heard
Mhm.
today that the farmer Mac has an hour, 60-minute freeze period.
An operator does, you said?
That came from Trinity. For asked that question
Mm-hmm.
last week. How long that be? Trinity, said that the farmer Mac has. I don't know, I can search.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
After.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
See, that's, he had a. Ready to go back, showed him that the club was activity,
Mm-hmm.
activity. And it was like less than 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like, through our, yeah, because we showed them in our procedure, our practice. We showed them that. Okay, and as long as you had it in your procedure.
Mm-hmm.
No. What is the, I don't know, but I'm just saying, from my experience, they
Yeah, my only concern with all of that is that I would have wanted to more state something like within 20 or by 24 hours, the piece of equipment should be returned to a state of compliance, something like that. And maybe that's how you have it written, but I wouldn't want to write in 24 hours if it isn't returned to a state of compliance. It's an opening. I would want to leave that area open. But you're right, 1,000% over that. If you have a procedure that you're following, you can show them that you're following that procedure, then it's up to them to agree or disagree to it. And that's one of the good things about LDAR plans that are submitted to the agency, because in a roundabout way, they are kind of buying off on it, and if we can get something put in our LDAR plan that is beneficial to us, then that's one of the ways to really kind of help in the negotiation when we talk about negotiating consent decrees and stuff like that. So we know who the big guns are, not Brian Whitley. One of the best ways to one of the best ways to control the heat is through dissipation. No, I do not. So dissipation theory, what that means is my brother used to do stereo systems and everything, and I was always fascinated with the amplifiers. And when you look at an amplifier, it's like a little black box, but it's got all these prongs coming out of it, And I remember the first time I ever asked him, like, why do they make them with this? These sticky things that sharp on the edges, they can cut you, whatever. He's like, we have to take the heat away from the amp or the amp is not going to work, right? So if we're thinking dissipation theory for this, then you see what I'm saying. If they bring 8 people in, you better have 8 people in. You are the one that's going to blow up. You're the one that's not going to work. You're the one that's going to get overheated. Don't let yourself be that person. Divide and conquer, get more help, and people who can actually help you. That's why we want to know who their top 5 is. Or if we're an in-house program and we don't have an external top 5, who are we going to use there? And if we don't like our draft picks inside because we're in-house, there's nothing wrong with you setting up some kind of side contract with your top 5 in the industry in case you were in one of these situations. What does a contract like that cost? You pay nothing until you need them, but then when you need them, then you'll pay. But at least you got them. This is man-to-man defense, no zone coverages. You ever seen what happens in zone coverage when a really good player is in a zone? It's nothing good for whoever's trying to defend them. And we're the ones in defense. So you want to make sure you're getting what you're paying for. In in-house programs, these will be a little bit more difficult. That's going to be my second subject in a few slides from now. Because when you work in in-house programs, you don't necessarily have control over what they do. I'll talk about that detail in a second. But develop a team of people that's going to work around the clock for audit support. We want everybody to be aligned on the same goals. We want them to be wanting to do this. Hey, this is where what is our goal? No findings. That's our goal. How are we going to attain that? And then, whatever that plan is, have people that's going to help us execute that plan. We don't need to wait for this audit to happen for us to be ready, right? So if you take anything away from this, build your audit team tomorrow, or at least by Monday. So you want to be starting on it. You want to be looking at it. You want to know what you're going to do. This shouldn't be up for discussion or a surprise or maybe or kind of coulda, woulda, shoulda. Like, you want to have that stuff together. It only makes your life easier. Make sure that your participating professionals understand the whys behind the job they perform. When we talked about it on Wednesday, this slide is very similar to another one I was talking about, and we called it diarrhea mouth. Anybody know what that is or who that is? Yeah, it's exactly what we think. Is that one person that talked way too much during an audit that he's just saying a bunch of stuff that you don't want him to say. So I said this earlier too, but people who want to be good, they practice until they get it right. People who want to be professionals, they practice till they can't get it wrong. One of the best examples of that is in football when you watch a wide receiver. In my personal opinion, of all athletes of all over the world and everything that they do, a wide receiver is the most impressive one that you could ever see, because there's so much stuff happening in a millisecond, and he can find a way to get free from someone who is super good covering him, get an inch open. The ball is already thrown. He doesn't even see it, right? He turns his head. He's able to catch the ball, know where this foot is, and drag it to where you have to look at it in slow motion to see if he was really bound or not. That is practicing until you can't get it wrong. But in our field, it's not going to be that fancy. It's not going to look that good, but at least we don't have fines. If we practice and we set this game up from the start for us so that we know that we have a fighting chance to win, then obviously we stand a better chance, right? The information control is eerily important. So when I say practice till they can't get it wrong, how many audits does your technicians go through a week? I would choose the great hair guy in the back. Are you, what? Oh, at all. So you just enjoy this whole thing. Okay. That's even better for me. How often do you think someone in the LDAR world that does LDAR Method 21 monitoring every day, how often should that person be checked for the accuracy of his job? Yearly. He says yearly. Good. Daily. I get daily. Well, what happens if you, like, there's some places, what's the most technicians y'all have in one plant, Aaron? 64 technicians in one plant. Even if you took 20 minutes per technician, that's a lot, huh? Okay, yeah. Actually, tell them how many again? How many a month? Every month. Every month.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough.
That little robot dog is good.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The robot won't ask for raises or not show up on Sundays. And there are 800 towers in a frac. Yeah. How many fracs do they have there now? Yeah. I feel like it's 12 maybe. And mhm. And they're at a 1%, not a 10% VLC. 1% VLC. That's why it was just ridiculous. So
Everything that contains
1% VLC.
what rule is that?
It's a PBR in addition to the state. It's a state PBR that's in there.
What state is it?
It's Texas. It's the same state you live. Yeah, it is crazy. I forget which subchapter something, and it's one of the. No, it's not even in the 28. It's in the permit, right? Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. So she said every day. You said once a year. What about, how often do you expect your guys to be audited? Every day. So you have less than 10?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Scroll through it,
Yeah.
check scan times.
Mm-hmm.
Great, right?
Right,
Like,
agreed.
I do, comparative mind.
Right.
So that's all we
Mm-hmm.
do, rotating basis. Certain activities will trigger another audit.
Yep.
right? So if I see someone sitting in the smoke shack, hanging with their handheld in their hand, I'm gonna trigger some audit.
Yeah.
So there's just different variables.
That makes a whole lot of sense. So the goal of what we're trying to do is make sure that when that person is audited by the third party audit or the agency, that he's going to say the exact same thing he said to you. So he has to say something to you so that you have some idea what he's going to say to them. And if what he's saying to you is the diarrhea mouth guy just over answering the question, saying way too many words, leading me to ask more questions, then we have to work with that guy just a little bit more. Work with him till he can't get it wrong. What's the definition of method 21? What is your job? That's one of my favorite questions to ask on an audit. What is your job? And he says, oh, I go out to monitor valves and I'm looking and blah, blah, blah. And we just to check these points, blah, blah. And I'm like, there's something I need to hear that is, I'm not hearing from you, right? Because every method 21 technician, their job is all the same. Find leaks. We used to even, we were crazy with it, but we used to even call them leak hunters. Like, you guys are leak hunters. Like, when you go out in the morning, you're hunting for leaks. Like, if you haven't found a leak, then we have a problem. Like, we gotta find these leaks. They're out there. They're hiding from you. Go get them, right? And like I said, we were a little crazy with it, but it would work, and we didn't fail audits. So,
Did you create a spreadsheet or something? I seen one of your.
yeah, Aaron and Andrew talked about it earlier. So, and then their presentation, but yeah, we've created the spreadsheet. Yeah.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, Andrew doesn't want to sell it. But like I say, he's a brilliant mind. Like, give him time in a dungeon and he comes out with some magic, man. So I have a very vivid imagination, right? So it would be all over the place, but we had a guy on our team that we call Q because, 007 had that guy to always create all these. And we had Andrew that was some Harry Potter stuff with him, but whatever, like we would have so much fun with the stuff that we were working on. Like, so we kind of low key had a R&D team, but we knew we wasn't getting paid for R&D. So we work all day on this stuff. So we have time to actually do the stuff that we think was cool, and so we might do a Monday, Tuesday, and then we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on some of this stuff or whatever, where nobody's messing with us and we can figure those things out. But yeah, that spreadsheet is nice. That's, yeah. I mean, if you,
Way to do it.
oh yeah. I mean, Aaron's in the room. Y'all might be able to hire him for that. We have done. I mean, because once it's built, like, we have plenty of technicians running by themselves now. I say they. But yeah, so so that thing, the premise is very simple. If you can get a score per person, then you can get a score for the site. And if you can get a score for the per site, you can get a score for the company. So the president can look at one number for the entire company, which I think he said like in October, it was like 82 or something, which is a good number. And now the whole state of compliance, that the one number represents at least 70, 75 different KPIs. Like, it's a good system. I can't. And you don't waste your time. Like, do you really want to, I mean, we do want to engage the people, right? So there's a with all your technicians, it is very, very important for you to remember this. 20, 60, 20. That equals 100%. 20, 60, 20. 20% of your people are going to be actively engaged. 60% of your people are going to be disengaged. And 20% of your people are going to be actively disengaged. It always puzzled me when I first learned those statistics as to how we jump from actively engaged to disengaged. Anybody know the reason for that? Yeah, pretty much, right? The reason why there's no engaged, because there's just no such thing as engaged. If you're engaged, you're actively engaged. And disengaged doesn't mean a bad thing. It just means that you're going through the motions and you're doing the job. You don't want to get fired, so you're not. So your job as a contract manager or as an observer from an LDAR coordinator position is to recognize the people that are actively engaged, because you can't lose them. You have to keep them. And the people who are actively disengaged, get rid of them. Like if you're a contract person that's gonna like be saying, okay, I want this contract, I want that contract, what's your turnover rate? That's the worst question in the world to ask somebody in LDAR. The reason why I say it is because I can make sure I have a very low turnover rate. It does not equal good quality for you. If anything, it's probably gonna be worse. You know, I had a guy show up for a whole year, right? And he was only in the plant 17 hours. I should have turned his ass over a long time ago, you know? So we don't want that. That's not something that you're looking for. But you are looking for the person that cares. And one of the fastest ways to make somebody not care is to not take care of the ones who don't care. And they're watching them get the same rewards and benefits that they're getting. So that's what we pay attention to. So LDAR audit must do number 3, divide and conquer. If you take anything from this, who's showing up at your site when the LDAR audit happens? Before I even let you answer that, there's one thing I can't stand. I can't stand when I'm coming to do an audit, and this is me being a little bit conceited, and I know I'm a little bit conceited, but when I show up to an audit and you give me a technician, that's like asking the receiver for Tom Brady to be guarded by some high school dude. Like, he's about to get ate up, you know? And so I'm in my mind, I'm like, that's just disrespectful. The manager's gonna stay in the office, and I'm like, oh my God, it turns my brain into a whole nother level of, like, it's a whole nother vision that comes over my face when I walk through your unit at that point. Because that is disrespectful. At least get somebody out here who can like go back and forth with me. I can ask some questions, but if you don't even think enough of me, and that's exactly what an auditor thinks about you. So the person that's coming out does not need to be mean and want to argue about everything. That's not going to work. It just needs to be a good conversation among some intelligent people in this LDAR game, right? And that is respectful, right? So definitely bring your big guns to the show. Generals only. Technicians should be audited, not be a part of the audit. Okay, so it's time to manage the pressure. We're talking about the agency now, right? What is the story? The story is always being told, but what is the story? And the honest answer to that question is, the story is, what does your program look like? I think I have it on another slide or two later on down, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, is it more important for it to be right? Controversial question number 2. Is it more important for your program to be right? More important for your program to look right? I'll say look right, raise your hand.
In an audit scenario, look.
In the audit scenario, because, and why is it so important? Because that's the one chance, whether or not if it's an agency, whether or not you're going to get an NOP or FOV. Do I want a program that is right but looks wrong and I get an FOV, or one that looks right but may not be right and I don't get an FOV? Somebody's paying money and somebody's not paying money. I'd rather be the person not paying money. Now, in the grand scheme of things, we all know that we don't want a bad program that looks right, but we definitely don't want a good program that looks bad. So let's make sure that what we're doing, we make sure our story is being told, because it already has been told. All of us that are in here, if we've been doing LDAR if we've been doing it since the beginning of this year, the story's already been told. Every time you fix the valve, how long it took you to do it, the due diligence you did on the shift logs and things like that, where they found leaks that didn't come up through your LDAR program. Did you capture them correctly? Put them in the database like you were supposed to? All these things are part of your story. Who needs that story to be good? From an agency standpoint, when you're looking at the agency, it is your lawyer. Inside counsel or outside counsel, they're the ones that care about this story. And the better you're able to tell that story, the more relevant you stay to the situation, the more engaged in with them, and the more they trust you when they're actually trying to figure out what they're going to do about this situation. If you're not engaged and you have a horrible story, they just cut you out right off the back and you don't even hear anything about it. And then you see your company make a bunch of decisions that you have to follow that's super hard for you and not better for them, and they don't even care. So what happens when you assume? My mom used to always tell me that you don't win, that's for sure. If you start assuming, if you don't check, if you don't double check, you're going to be in a situation where you made a butt out of yourself, and everybody looks bad in the whole end thing, right? Trying to be politically correct here. So loose ends usually end up being FOVs. We don't want loose ends. We talked about that early. If they write something in the book, we want to know what's in the book, and we want to talk about it when, how often?
Right there.
Every day. Yes, every day. So, and with what is trust without verification? Problems. That's what I would say. So you want to keep the mood inquisitive and cooperative, but definitely inquisitive. First of all, you got your big guns at the show. So, and when Aaron and I, when we worked together, he was super good at Texas, and I was really good at federal. So when, and I did other states too. But if we were in Texas, I didn't feel good going and doing a Texas rule audit without him, right? So he and I would go in together, and if it was a Texas question, he'd run it down. And if it was a federal question, I had it, you know. And I go up to Michigan. I had a guy named Chris Taylor, and Chris knew that whole Midwest. Like he knew all the rules and stuff in the Midwest, and all I had to do was know the federal stuff, right? So we would go in. But what does that mean for you guys? It means that you got a team. We know, right? So depending on what they're talking about or what happened, just like they're huddling and taking their notes and, you know, talking about different things, we're huddling, and we might switch up in the afternoon because this guy's asking more federal stuff and this guy's asking more state stuff. And it's like, oh, hey, you got to get him on this, bro. I'm gonna go with your guy right here. And what does this mean for the site? For the site, it means ease and comfort and less stress. For us, you know, talk about that. I won't even answer that question, what it means for us. But don't be afraid to question their stuff. I mean, we do all we do. As I said before, the understanding the regulations that if you got enough people there to do that, then debate it cooperatively. And its enforcement agent's interpretation does not always coincide with the intent of the rule. And consistency diminishes malice. And so since you've already answered the question, my brother in the back, I'm gonna have to point to you. How does consistency diminish malice? Which is basically, in other words, if I have a procedure and I'm following it, how does it take away from them saying I'm doing something bad? So let's just recap the experience that you gave us. They wanted to write you up and they said that, you know, this was a problem. And then you were able to show them consistency through a procedure, right? And then once they saw that, what did they say? Did they say you were bad and we're still gonna give you a fine? So consistency diminishes malice. Malice means you were intending to do something wrong, you were trying to be bad, you were trying to get over on them, and then you show them like, no, this is how we do it. We do it in, give me one of your units. Alcohol unit. We do it in the alcohol unit this way, we do it in the crew unit this way, we do it in the platform unit this way. It's all done the same way. And this is our corporate or company procedure. Makes a lot of difference in the audit, man. It makes a lot of difference in the audit. So for the agency, the story is always being told, like I said before, and we have to remember who we're telling the story to. Who are we telling the story? Who are we telling the story to? Is it the enforcement agent? Do I need him to believe me? Kind of want him to. It's a good idea if he does. But a lot of times enforcement agents are people, as I said on Wednesday, that are mad because you didn't hire them. Think about it. Okay, so I would say, and hopefully, first of all, do I have enforcement agents in the room? I asked. There is a small chance that that person got out and decided that's exactly where they wanted to go. Maybe 70-30 if I'm being very considerate. 30% chance they wanted to go to the agency. There's a 70% chance they wanted to come to your facility or work in the same job you might have, right? So when they come to your facility, they're probably not coming in a kumbaya spirit. We shouldn't even be expecting them to come in a kumbaya spirit. You know, we hope to change that during the course of the situation, but in many cases, I mean, Aaron can talk pretty openly, and so can I, about a situation we had in Michigan where the job that the lady wanted, she got passed over and she was hired they hired another guy. That guy proceeded to have some negative history, some kind of way with her family, right? Her family. And she was hired by the state on like a Monday, and by Friday, she was at the facility with a pencil and paper. That is not cool. Not cool. I mean, we're not talking about, this is way up north in northern, not Upper Peninsula, but just below that. So it's not like it's, 25,000 people up there. There might be 8 in the whole 100-mile radius or whatever, right? So, but in any event, it was a small plant. Everybody knew what was going on, and we had to mitigate that whole situation. It was very difficult, to try to, change that. So I talked about this, and I can't say it enough because it's one of the things that's affected my life big time. And it's one of the biggest ways to really help culture and change. So it's called Think, Feel, Experience. Anybody heard me say this before? Think, feel, Aaron, you heard it. Experience. If you want to change how a person thinks, you must first change how that person feels. And if you want to change how a person feels, you have to change what they experience. So when we have an agency in our place, the experience that they get with us will eventually determine how they think about us. So if we're thinking from that perspective, it's going to change the way we do what we do, and then we'll make better moves because we want them to experience something that they will end up thinking and feeling, or feeling and thinking, right? So that story is always being told, and that's how you handle it with the agency. Let's talk about a third-party situation. So we've been talking about the agency a lot. But that's more to us. We see an agency audit maybe once a year or once every other year. We see third-party audits maybe sometimes a little bit more frequently than that, right? So the story starts when the initial data request is received, and that's generally weeks before they come on site. Now, they're going to call you and ask you for your data. Somebody said earlier that I used to be able to get in the back door, but I can't get in the back door. But every time I need a copy of the database, I just ask for the copy and I get it. How many of us send a copy of the database to the person to do the audit on us and not done the same damn audit on our own database? It don't sound as smart to me. Because he's about to comb through this thing that you've given him with a fine-tooth comb. Don't we have the same ability? Or if we got a good top 5, somebody on that team is good. If you give Mr. Gunn a database, there is nothing that guy's going to tell you about your database that Gunn can't tell you already ahead of time. So if you don't have a gun, find him, find one. Somebody in your company should be at that level, right? I don't do databases. Like it'll drive me crazy. I can't, but I have people who do. Hopefully you got somebody that does, and we have people that do. And if we do, run the same thing. Do we really always need to wait till the audit comes to even do it? It's not a bad idea to put this on some kind of 6-month rotation. It don't hurt. If anything, it will help. Make it a lot harder for them to find what they're looking for, right? So let's start building that case then. And you should start building yours. So when they show up on site, they, from that database, have a good idea of where they want to go monitor, what stuff they want to go monitor, what issues they may have. I mean, we looked at a database one time, and this unit had fin-fan plugs being monitored. This unit didn't have fin-fan plugs being monitored. This one had PRVs that looked like they were in closed vent system. And then this one looked like they were in closed vent system, but they were being monitored, but these weren't. I had over 100 and some different questions just from looking at the database. Then now I knew which units I wanted to go look at to find out where I wanted to be. And we should be doing the exact same thing, especially when we're not the ones that's in control of the data every day. And obviously we don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. So also you want to, make sure that you've done what you're asking them to do, and remember the attorney motto. So we talked about what happens when you assume. Attorney's motto is, I don't ever want to ask a question that I don't know the answer to. That's why we do that's why they do depositions. That's why they go through that whole thing. They prepare a defense. When they're preparing a defense, they want all the information they can possibly have, so that when you actually see them in court, and we're actually a trial attorney, and he's asking questions, he's not asking questions that he don't already know the answer to. That's why when you switch up your answer on the stand, then they run back to the little thing and they get this little piece of paper out and flip a few pages and they say, you said on such and such a day, that was from your deposition. So whenever you do your deposition, that's like law. If you change that, you're really going to be setting yourself up to be incompetent, right? But the point to this is, it's possible for us to not have them ask us a question that we don't already know if we do the same research that they did to find the questions that they had to ask in the first place. Let that sink in. So loose ends, like I said, always being up with finding. Are we going to trust them or are we going to verify it? Who all just wants to trust them? I know you don't. You want to trust because you don't want to do an audit. No, we want to verify all of it. We want to verify all of it. Ignorance. Ignorance is not okay. It is not okay. Is we need to know. We're on the LDAR must do, audit must do number 4. So ignorance is not okay. Once again, you still want to keep it cooperative and inquisitive. You can be a little bit, I mean, at the end of the day, you're kind of paying these guys to be here to do the audit for you on a third-party audit. So you can kind of be a little bit more demanding, but demanding is still not the right word. It should be a softer word. I just can't think of it right now. But still inquisitive, ask the questions, and you can go into a deeper level of discussion and debate with those guys. Because a lot of times, enough times, they're just trying to take the easiest path away too, right? They're trying to get through it. It's a $20,000 a week for me. I'm gonna do this audit, knock this stuff out, and they don't really want the problems. They don't want the debate. They don't want those conversations. So the more that you're doing it, sometimes they get a little bit aggravated. So you have to balance that, but at the same time, you also got to show them you're not going to be a pushover site. You know, we read the rules just like you. We think we're doing it right. Like, you're not God. You're a person. Put your pants on one time, one leg at a time, just like I did, you know? So don't be afraid to question their interpretation also. And almost always in these audits too, there's some higher, you know, LDAR demigod type person or something that may not be on site. So if you're getting to a point where you really don't agree, you know, I've literally had to take my interpretation as an auditor up to corporate because of what was happening at the site, where they were just dead wrong. They were wrong, but they were definitely doing all. It's like they read my stuff before before I came to audit them, and they were putting all my own stuff against me, right? So then I was like, but here's my regulatory citation saying that you can't do X, right? And it ended up, like I said, it ended up being all the way up to corporate. I'm like, I can't in good conscience just take this off. I can't take it off, right? But from their perspective, if you really disagree, then don't let it go. Don't let them just turn in an audit report. There's also rebuttals to audits, right? So even though you got to put their audit report in and submit it to the agency, keep in mind you can add to that audit report as an addendum, and add to it and say, we understand this is this interpretation. That is not our interpretation. We have done it X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. Mr. Whoever you're sending this to, state agency or EUS EPA, if there's anything that you would like to chime in on this to help us in direction, we'll move forward. But as a corporate group, we agree with X, right? Chances of that guy who did that audit and stuck the guns like that coming back again is probably won't ever have to deal with him again. Often their ideas do not make up the majority. I just want you to keep that in mind. Like I said earlier, sometimes they will do an audit on facility A, and you see, because they're returning a report, so you see the findings, and then you get to facility B, they have the same situation, but it's not a finding because they fought it and they actually spoke up. And then even though that guy knows that it wasn't a finding and he didn't write it up in facility B, you see facility C and it's on the report again. Like, if anything, it should have came out the report of facility A. But that tells me right now that they're not really that worried about the majority. If they got a mindset of thinking these things, they want to be able to put something on a report. One of the happiest and saddest moments of my life, hands down. So we're getting ready for an audit, and I'm a supervisor at the site. It's in Robinson, Illinois, Marathon Petroleum. And we are all talking. I got a team that's been with me for a couple of years, right? And we're like, dude, this time we're getting no findings. I think we can do it. No findings, right? We started, obviously it's always started, right? But we went through every unit. We were working 12 to 16-hour days, everything. The dude came up with one open-ended line on a tote, a chemical tote, right? And so I did the research on it, and it was cataclysmic, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So there was a legal explosive type reason why we couldn't. I got the engineer to say us right off on it and show it to him, you know, because that's why you don't have plugs on asphalt and stuff like that. You end up overpressuring or whatever. So in any event, he took it off. He had to take it off. He did not want to. And he had like 3 or 4 supplementals, no findings. So I whacked my crew and we were really close, right? So we were like, we're gonna have a big Whitley audit, right? A big Whitley party. So a big Whitley party is when we all come to my house and nobody can take leave. And, you know, I had this house, we had 3 floors and I made this swamp punch and this voodoo juice and some stuff because I'm from Louisiana, right? And so this is a big party, the whole thing. Like we just had so much fun and that was so cool because we got no findings. So then I see one of the corporate environmental managers maybe like a month later. And I'm like, oh, so hey, you heard about that audit in Robinson, right? And she said, yeah, I saw that. That was just a sucky audit. He did a terrible job. Oh, took everything out of me. Took everything out. She was dead ass serious. Excuse my language. She was serious. Took everything out of it. She instantly went to the audit was bad, not how much work we actually put into it to get it to that point. Taught me a lesson though. One finding is not going to hurt me. Legitimate. I mean, and it also teaches you that guy. I mean, he stayed a whole extra day, guys. The audit was supposed to be from Monday to Thursday. He flew home on Saturday. He worked all day on Friday because he knew that they were going to think his audit was no good if he didn't find. I mean, man, what are we trying to do here? You know, so yes, you got to give him something. I've never, since that point forward, I've never tried for perfection. Perfection gets you discredited. So remember, like I said, he's telling a story too. So there's a person above him. Post-audit responses, preparation. Okay, so this is talking about how we're going to respond to the audits after, actually, probably lied to you. I told you it's 2:40. What time does this class start? 1 o'clock? Okay. Does anybody need a bathroom break or y'all want to keep rolling for a little while? Y'all want to go to 3 o'clock and then take a break? Okay. I got the stuff that's coming is better. So, but so break now or break at 3? You gotta go? All right. Adios. Hasta luego. 20 more minutes, then take a break, and then we'll try to get it. Because I know you were thinking about driving, right? So you want me to get so for those who come back after 3, well, there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about. Let's talk about the last controversial thing. Okay, that'd be good too. All right, so contractor versus in-house audit challenges. So I decided I wanted to talk about this. I know it's a controversial subject, but I figured I would go in anyway, since it needs to be discussed. An auditor, when we're an auditor, and you have an in-house program, we lick our chops right off the bat. And anybody knows what that means? You ever heard that phrase? It's kind of a Southern saying, lick his chops. Yeah, have you ever seen a dog when he's getting ready to eat something? And it's sitting right there in front of him and he's just, you know, he's salivating because I know that them guys, in most cases, and I'm going to give you examples, do not care about that job as much as the contractor is made to have to care about the job. And we're going to talk about the differences between it, right? So the audit is important to you. Yes, you're an environmental science person, a chemical engineer, whatever, and you have this job as an LDAR coordinator. It is important to you. It makes you look good or make you look bad. I mean, I like to think that because Honor's the HSE manager at the Detroit refinery, it had a lot to do with how she made a move on us in the plaza when she was an LDAR coordinator and the plant manager saw that she did something that was very successful. Right? Obviously, there's a whole lot more stuff that happened than just that. But I could take that little bit of piece and be like, hey, man, we have to make that happen, right? So when it's all said and done, yes, you do care. Yes, you do care. But those guys, not saying they're going to do a bad job, but they do have competing agendas. Generally, in an in-house program, I can speak for one I know in Louisiana, one I know up in Chicago. Those people doing the job don't work for this person that cares about the audit. They actually have another boss. They have a whole other thing going on. It's harder to manage in-house technicians. Why is it harder to manage in-house technicians? Well, union rights often collide with and challenge regulatory compliance. All right, so you want me to give you an example? You cannot work 6 hours without taking a 30-minute break. On the other hand, we worked 16 hours because we had to make sure that this unit was validated because it just came off turnaround and somebody wants to show up on Monday morning. How do you get your in-house guy to do that? First of all, you cannot get your in-house guy to do that. You have to go ask either a union representative or whoever his supervisor is if they can do that. And that person has to be engaged enough in the activity and what could possibly happen to get them to want to do that. And if they don't want to do it, they have rights. Everybody should have rights, I agree. But they have rights to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Oh, I got vacation planned this day. I have, you know how many times I've lost a vacation or didn't go on a vacation because my client needed something? You ever done it before, Aaron? I already know the answer, but yeah. Yeah, when we worked together, he used to have to send me, because we would pay like partial vacation back. He used to have to send me, he's like, he had to set an alarm to send me a notice, because the two notices have to be far enough apart to be legitimized, so you actually get your check for not taking your vacation or whatever, because the company was really big on us taking vacation or whatever. But we had to remember to do that because there's been times that I have 3 girls and a wife, right? So there's times when this call comes on Friday. If the EPA is gonna show up on Monday, which happened in Oxable, right? And I'm supposed to be going on vacation, that vacation, it's not important anymore. I want to do it. Yeah, I know my family, but this is, I am as invested in this thing as you are. And that is a difference. I mean, we've had, like, for example, we got one facility that waits till wintertime because they want to take all their vacation around Christmas and everything, but they leave the hardest stuff to do in December, in freaking Chicago. You know how much ice is in the pipe band in Chicago? Why am I in the pipe band in Chicago in December looking for valves that you could have monitored in July? But you don't have to because you can take vacation and they can't tell you that you can't, you know? In Denver, what? Oh, yeah. So in Denver, this was really convoluted. In some kind of way, they were able to make it the operations responsibility. So you got a whole environmental leg. This is me doing a gap analysis on a facility, trying to prepare them for an upcoming consent decree. And you have over here operations and you have maintenance. So that's in every plant, right? But generally, the environmental people are worried about the environmental stuff. So the environmental people here are worried about the environmental stuff, but it don't have anything to do with the regulatory LDAR requirements. So operations is responsible for working with the contractor, and the contractor pretty much only turns reports into the LDAR coordinator, and there was a complete disconnect on 3 different levels of what was supposed to be done. Even so much so as to try to get an approval, like, oh, we need to retag this unit, then you didn't even know who you were supposed to go to. And quite frankly, at the time, there was nobody to go to. Like, and so now, combing through all of that information and trying to build a structure of what it's supposed to look like is where we are now. And it's eye-opening to them based on what they had before. Split chains of command is what this is all about, right? So when you have different competing agendas, then generally the one that don't make you money is the one that's going to lose out. Okay, so we said that when an auditor sees an in-house program, he licks his chops. But when audits for contractors happen, we're generally shaking in our boots. Why would I say that we're shaking in our boots? Even me, with all the experience and knowledge and everything I have, when I have an audit come up at one of my facilities, I am a little bit shaking in my boots. My knees are a little shaking, Elvis Presley or something. But why? Why would we be shaking in our boots? I gotta pick on the coolest sunglasses in the room.
Moment of truth, whatever they say.
Yeah, 1,000%. He said, moment of truth. And what it boils down to me is you don't know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. And that not knowing causes a little bit of fear. So that means that this audit is important to you, but it is life or death for us. Why is it life or death for me? Why would it be life or death for me? Yes. If I don't have a contract, I don't have money. If I don't have money, I don't have food. And if I don't have food, I can't eat. And neither can my child, neither can my daughter, my wife. No, right? So when we see audits, yeah, I'm shaking my boots a little bit because it's a reflection on us. And if you have a bad audit in this industry, it's too small. People know and they talk. And now it's like, oh, we want to hire you, but I don't think y'all know what y'all doing, man. Y'all really messed that facility up the road, and you can't have any of these things happening to you. You don't want to have any of these things happening to you. So as we always say, we got one time to shine. So to reverse that, Aaron would do it, I would do it. We would go to our sites and we get them ready. And we're like, an audit is not an opportunity for you to look bad. An audit is an opportunity for you to shine. You can show them how good you are. It don't have to be bad. It's bad if you've been doing bad. But look at all of the stuff that we have been doing. As a company, we have practiced until we can't get it wrong. So now we just got to show them. It's our time to shine, right? We got one job. It's 100% compliance, and everybody's on that same page. And this is different between contract for employee and in-house program, right? So lastly, even if we went through all that and we did all that, as an LDAR coordinator, you guys have the ability to make us a sacrificial lamb if necessary. And there's some reasons why we would deserve that, right? But even if you were, we've had situations where we've had to do interventions, myself, Aaron, Matthew, because how they wanted it done is not how we would do it. And if we were to continue down this road doing it that way, we are going to fit into that third bullet, sacrificial lamb. And they're going to step back and be like, I don't know why they was doing it, and that's not good for us, right? So we are very much an inclusive company. Anytime I'm doing something like this, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And if we do disagree, somebody needs to document what that disagreement is, because at this time, when it's our time to shine, there will be no shining if there's no agreement on what we're going to be doing. We offer turnkey programs. It's another reason why. So we should obviously take ownership of the program. Our level of ownership in it should be very high as it stands during the course of an audit. So they should be, like I said, we should be every bit as much as engaged. There's also no competing agendas at all. Only one goal, and that is to pass this audit and do good, right? And when do we start preparing for the audit? We should have already started last week. Every day is the day we prepare for an audit. Most of the consent decrees in place right now are due to some other violation that's so great that cannot be argued or done. Like I've seen in my case, I've seen 28 violations of LDAR, as much as missing the MON implementation by 2 years, having people who did Method 21 monitoring but didn't know the definition of Method 21, or couldn't even explain to you where it was in the regulation, or couldn't demonstrate to you how to turn on a machine, how to calibrate the machine. I think they knew how to turn it on. They couldn't calibrate it. And at the end of the day, they didn't end up with a consent decree. But I've seen places that had a couple of open-ended lines that had plugs already in them. Anybody know how that happens? How can you have a plug in a line, but it'd be an open-ended line? Yeah, a leaking plug is an open-ended line. But how can they say it's an open-ended line as a leaking plug when there's no requirement for the plug to have been monitored? It wasn't visual. He didn't look at it. That's a very good answer. He didn't look at it and saw it visually leaking. He was just checking the plugs, and this plug ended up being at 10,000 ppm. And he wrote it up as an inoperable control device, right? So he had 3 of those.
That's not what the uniform.
Exactly, right?
No other reg says that.
Exactly. So to my point, this was NSPS VVA. So plugs did not have to be monitored, right? And like I said, he still wrote up the citation, right? So I'm ready because I'm like, okay, he's not really pointing to it. He called it an inoperable control device. So even though the plug was in there, and there was no visual leak, I had pictures of the valve and everything. I was ready for this argument, right? And then the other thing we had was like 6 over-insulated components and two quarters of leak percentages that weren't on par with what the agency found. So when I went back and did the subset of all of that and pulled out like what they monitored and what our leak percentages was on that, then we were within the ratio of 3. And I thought like, oh, we got this. We got this. And then come to find out their management of the permit, their calculations, the counts on the valves were all off and wrong. So they had a permit that didn't fully encompass all of what they were doing at the facility. That meant that they could be shut down like today. So we call that situation, a smoking gun. And in a smoking gun, there's no leverage there. You're not leveraging anything. You're just trying to do damage control at that point. So all these are examples of different smoking guns that we've seen all over the place as we've been coming around doing the work. The permit reviews, like I said, double check your permits, the valve counts. We had one group counted the instrumentation as one. So you see 27 PFT 101, right? Unit 27, pressure flow transmitter, process flow transmitter. And he thinks that it's one component. And in reality, it's probably at least 5 valves and probably 12, 14 connections, you're saying? Do that for all the instrumentation in there, and each one of them have a agreed to average leak rate that you need to attach to it to develop what your potential to emit is. And once you have that big number, you know what you should be building your permit on, what amount. It was way off, way off. And in these things, like I say, if this comes out in audit, you're just kind of doing damage control. So this will be the breaking point. And you guys can go ahead and take 10, 15 minutes or whatever. And then if there's anybody that's coming back from that, we can talk about some more good stuff. And for those who stuck it out this far, thank you very much. I'm very appreciative. I think I have business cards. Actually have 2, but I think I gave you my card already, right? I'm not even against in person.
Yeah, that's right, I tried to scan yours.
Yes, right. I had to give you an old school.
My phone is stupid. I did have mine turned off, I wouldn't figure it out. Tried to scan one of those, scooters downstairs, I had to go in there and figure out how to turn it off.
Really?
Yeah, it worked, mine worked on the scooter. It did take me a minute.
So it has a R, so take it out.
No, it wasn't,
Sometimes it just works.
the chip finally was reading.
But you might have it turned off.
It should work.
Brian.
And safe travel.
Just take a picture either.
Yeah.
I got yours from.
Yes,
From Zach Taylor.
Oh.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah,
I've got to go.
Thank you. Thanks for staying for this long. Like, I really was happy you guys are here. I'm surprised. I don't think.
Yeah, the end of the time.
I know.
Wait is gonna get something to eat.
That. So good. Here, I'll give you one too. There's one of mine as well.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's see if there is.
And we put our key card on ours too. Our key card too. Sometimes I just.
I'll be back for the rest.
We try without it before it came. It doesn't need a QR code all the time.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's got an RFID part to it.
Wow.
Sometimes, especially if you have it pop up.
Okay.
It's complicated. It's,
I made,
that's his game. Same one.
oh, okay, yeah.
That's cool.
What is it, NFC?
Yeah, NFC, that's exactly the one. Oh, you have it.
Good.
So you have NFC on that.
Okay, I'll give it another go.
Where you guys from?
Lake Jackson.
Hey, Jackson, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's her stopping ground.
Yes.
I actually work up here in, I'm at the Exxon in, Baytown. So I'm driving up to, so we work for Hydrogen. So, yeah, so I do a good little haul every day. But yeah, so I geek out on the old 4C stuff. I watch a lot of your old seminars. Yeah.
We're like,
Hey, we're here
we're
on our
like,
own time, you know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah, we came as individuals.
Yeah, it's just like you geek out on it, you know?
That's kind of what I do.
Yeah, that's good, man.
Everything that we get like, yes. Get it.
Thanks, man. Thank you very much. Yeah, so you guys have the basis for it. Like when I'm back there, like sometimes you look at people on that couch, they just give you this eeriness. So you got. I look at you a little too much. I apologize.
That's good, that's
You have to get center.
I do it too in my meetings, so there's like two guys that just stare at it.
The other ones are talking to.
Yeah. But like a lot of times people won't, they're not even looking, half my guys are sleeping the whole time. I'm like,
Yeah.
snap out of it.
Yeah.
That's always like that.
Yeah.
Here, I'll try it again just a little bit. Because I am not,
Is there NFC?
I don't have it.
Well, it's been a little bit fun on.
There it is. Oh, that's what happened.
There it goes. There it is. Okay.
Yeah, we're about to be in the basement or,
Being our original.
You guys, hiring?
Well, I am an employee of one. I have.
Oh, wow.
I have a, yeah, 'cause I'm a donation consultant.
Oh, okay.
So I left Alliance, I never went to Alliance. I left outside of partners. So it's-
Awesome.
Usually, I had enough contracts. In 2022, so.
How did you recognize?
Yeah, so basically for me, you hear all those different things I talked about. I don't know what clients thought was of our boss. Just, I like it, I know it.
Very
Right
good.
now, I feel project. Security negotiation, all this stuff is kind of outside of that realm. I didn't want to challenge this.
That's good. And enjoy what you do, right?
Yeah.
Right? Troubleshooting all that stuff, figuring out all those loopholes and finding all that stuff, you know what I mean? And that's where the fun stuff is.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll be right back. We're just gonna go get some.
Yeah, McGarrett. Okay. That's next man.
What's the idea? I don't know. What's that?
Oh, well,
It's not a big one, huh? Site
I
manager.
just moved to Houston a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in soil and groundwater, but now I'm in air, starting from scratch.
Arrow gets you. Once they get you in, so they don't like to let you out.
Yeah, break
I think
that.
I'm at one of your.
But yeah,
Excellent bait now.
Oh,
now I'm doing greenhouse gas reporting, so I'm still learning those regs.
Yeah.
And,
Those questions.
eventually they want to get me into LDAR, so,
Yeah, it's the beast.
Get a head start.
It's a lot.
That's good.
That's a lot.
also my coworker, she didn't make it because, she, didn't want to fly in the middle of Delta variant.
First motor.
Yeah.
Surge, but,
So, yeah, so it's a lot of work and.
like, she does LDAR,
It's different stuff.
so I'm glad I got, this recorded for her.
That's good.
So in the end, you just like email 4C and tell them what you want and they give it to you?
Barbara Kellum, she's still. our
I have no idea how it works.
contact.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
But I think Barbara speaks to you, I know AJ. Barbara's got like. So she's going to finance, transferring her side of finance. And her reporting, her, is an operator. Good fun.
So
I've been learning
where-
a lot, that's for sure.
Where are you located?
Atlanta, Georgia.
It is.
Atlanta, Georgia, yes. I've been there for about 8 years. Before that, I was mostly in the Midwest around Indianapolis area
Yeah.
for 10
Most of
years.
stuff, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, we're getting older. Getting older.
You know, this is my first time in Boston, and I guess I'm not sure if I'm
Like you just called me the other day,
Just
they're down 10.
not in the right portion of Boston, but I'm not sure what the big deal is.
Oh, like keep Boston weird and
Yeah.
like, have you done 6th Street or any of that? Did you go do the spasmatics?
No.
Well, that's why you don't know. That's all the stuff right there.
Okay.
When do you go home?
When do I go home? Oh, right after this.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, my wife and I are in town tonight, so we figured we would do something. I want to take her to a really cool restaurant, something different. We did 3 forks last night, which was great. But we'll do something different tonight. So if you decide you want to stick around, you're more than invited to hang out with us. So we'll find something to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a great time at the conference, so I'm sure I'll be back next year. And maybe next time I can stay the whole day.
Yeah, yeah.
And there won't be COVID.
I know.
when I go to
Oh my God, all of this COVID stuff is like, what is going on? I understand. I understand all the views. I understand all the views. I think the only view I would have is like in your situation, I don't know if you're vaccinated or not, but you know, if I decided I wasn't going to do the vaccination, I don't think I would decide not to do the vaccination and not wear the mask. I would do one or the other, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I am vaccinated and, it's just, my boyfriend was exposed to so many children. He's a
Right.
school teacher.
Right.
So like, I mean, it's more likely that he'll give COVID to me,
Mhm.
but I don't want to be the one to give COVID to him
Yeah.
and then all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife's a registered nurse, so matter of fact, she's a registered nurse over a pulmonary unit. She was the manager of it during COVID. So she wrote all the procedures. She had to do all of it. She
put it in during that time, really trying to figure out what all was what. And, yeah, especially back when they didn't even know what they were dealing with. They didn't even know whether it was airborne or not, all of that stuff, like.
Yeah, I didn't either. So we-
Yeah.
You see
Some
that.
people were washing all their groceries, washing all their Amazon boxes, like.
Because I would just see like a beat up truck here and there, it's all beat up and raggedy, but East Coast and Midwest.
2 more minutes, we'll get started.
Oh, really? Wow.
I just moved to Houston from Baton Rouge.
Really?
Yeah.
I was born and raised in Baton Rouge. Yeah, small world. I grew up in Glen Oaks. You know where that is?
It's true, it's true.
I lived there for almost 2 years.
In Glen Oaks?
Now they
Or
got-
in Baton Rouge?
Baton Rouge.
Oh, what part of Baton Rouge?
New Orleans for a year.
Oh, okay. I did a couple of years in Algiers, just across the bridge. So where you stayed in that Baton Rouge?
I was in the Shenandoah.
Oh, yeah, I know what it is.
Yeah, really close to where I didn't have to get on.
So who do you work for?
Terracon,
Right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah, Terracon, I mean, Terracon already does like, phase 1, phase 2
Those are
asbestos. In, like some non-environmental engineering services. But Terracon National just bought this firm in Midland that does LDAR
Mhm.
and does greenhouse gas and air permitting and all that good stuff for oil and gas. And so when I transferred here to Houston, like,
And they built some big ones.
Like-
That was
they had a
crazy.
need really for someone in Midland. So I'm working remotely for Midland.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
Yeah,
I'm.
it's not- they're not gonna get you-
Like, my degree is in chemical engineering.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where?
Mississippi State.
Nice. You are full of surprises. You got all over, huh? You're full of surprises. You've been all over.
Not really.
So,
This is
well, I've
like
heard
a
3
easy
different states.
place.
That's 3 more than a lot of other people I know. So the world is a small place though. So I'll tell you this and then we'll get back started. So my wife and I discovered our favorite place in this world is San Pedro, Belize. It's a little city in Belize that's an island, 29 square miles, and it's right off the 2nd largest barrier reef in the world. It's a hop, skip, and a jump away from this place called Mexico Rocks. That's like an underwater aquarium like you never believe. Amazing. There's these big giant rocks in the water, look like pine cones, and you swim around them or whatever. So if that wasn't exclusive enough, because it's 2 hours and a half off the coast of Belize, right? There's an excursion that we took that takes you to another smaller private island. It's got a beautiful beach, and I mean, the water doesn't get this deep, 100 feet out or whatever, right? And so you have to carefully get the boat up in there and everything. And there is nothing on here but a bench and a box with some metal grating on it or whatever. And that's how they cook the food. So we went and fished and we, caught red snapper and some stuff like that. It was really nice fish and the whole thing, right? And we come back and with the guys like preparing everything, he's cooking our fish, and another boat comes up to this private island, which is a private island of the private island that we already own, right? And these 2 people come up, and it's like I have like maybe 5 in my entourage or whatever, with my kids and stuff. And so I walk over to them and say, "Hey, don't be a stranger. Like, it's okay. We can share the bench with you guys. We're listening to music." I was smoking a cigar, like we're having a good time. She's like, "Oh, thank you, blah, blah, blah." And inevitably we're like, "Oh, so where are you guys from?" And do you know they had the nerve to say Atlanta? I'm like, we halfway across the world and we meet some people that literally live like 10 miles away from my house. That's crazy. The world is a small place. All right, that's enough of my stories. Let's move on. So when we're dealing with the audit, we have to realize what the big picture is. Seeing the big picture is very, very important, and you always want to keep that in the back of your mind. So when you're dealing with personality types, there are 4 basic personalities. Then different versions of them, you've got people kind of breaking out into 16, but you got 4 primary ways to respond to something. So 1 is influential,
You're gonna try to finesse the situation. You're gonna try to, you're probably pretty good at de-escalation. You maybe be charismatic, something like that. That's one type of personality. The second is analytical. You're gonna look at it. You're gonna analyze it. You're gonna dig in deep. You're gonna look for the thing that doesn't add up. You rather see calculations. You rather see scientific. Third way is feel, right? So a feel person believes in chi and aura and gut feelings, and that person just didn't rub me right. It didn't make me feel like I'm supposed to feel or whatever. But that person's always trying to balance the equation because they don't want to be mad at anyone. They don't want anyone to be mad at them. They care about what people think, And then the last one is just pretty rigid. It may not have the biggest or brightest personality, but they will follow the rules. They want to dot I's and cross T's. They believe accomplishment in their day-to-day lives is based upon how many things that they knock off their task list. And so you got all these people, right? Knowing that you have all these people, you need to know on your team which people you need to do what job, right? Because the person that's the gold personality, which is the dot I's and check T's, cross T's, is not always going to be able to see the big picture. So sometimes, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be a good manager. None of these personalities are better than the other, by the way. They're all just a tendency of how you tend to think. What you use it for is to understand who you have on your team and what roles they play that best suit them. The Koch family was really good at it. There's a board I took a picture of when I was doing some brainstorming with Molex. And I did brainstorm with them for them to create that little thing that they created, right? The boxes that are being put in the units. So in any event, one of the things they said is like if we see that the decision we've made and a person is not working, it doesn't mean that that person is a failure. There may be something else that person needs to do that is better for them, right? And it will actually take that extra step in some cases to be able to do that. So in our situation, when we're building our team and we're wanting to see what the big picture is, we want to be able to pass this audit. We want our program to be right, but we also know for sure that we want it to look right. And we also want to put people in places that complement that action being accomplished, right? So it does, we talked about this already. So then you want to do a gut check evaluation of your staff and the people that are participating in running your LDAR program. What does it mean by a gut check evaluation? Well, to me, the gut check evaluation means that if you got diarrhea mouth, he's probably not the one that needs to be leading the group and leading the people out in the field, right? Because, sometimes the guys get separated and they're ready to go out and you got two auditors going out. If you picking and choosing your people, that's not the guy you want to take out. He talks too much, and you're helping him to not talk as much, but you got to pick and choose your people, and knowing what their personalities are and who they are will give a whole lot of, it'll make your life a little less stressful knowing what you have in your group, right? The last thing is, what is Meta 21? We ask that question all the time. You should ask it of every technician. And the answer to that is a procedure used to find equipment leaks. So when you're talking to your technicians or you're asking them or you're observing them, if they don't talk about finding leaks, and they don't understand what their job is. And the data doesn't lie. So I have worked these 16-hour days I told you about to make sure that we look good on this audit. But I can tell you this, there is not enough time in a month to fix 2 years of bad monitoring. Can't do it. So if the monitoring's bad, the data definitely won't lie. If it shows it's bad, you're done, right? You can't fix that overnight. So that's why we want you to be starting this story, because we said the story's being told already, right? So if we're starting a story that's being told already, one of the things we better know is what our leak percentages are, so that when we are looking at our data, that the same answers come up that we want to come up. So post-audit responses in preparation to a third party, you want to clarify everything that has happened and all the questions before they leave the site. Generally, when they leave the site, things start to slow down. They start to write their final revisions and everything, and you lose somewhat of an opportunity to answer those questions. So don't let the LDAR provider leave open items unanswered. So if you're the LDAR person, you want to make sure that you even know what these open items are, and they are at the top of your priority, not the bottom. So there can't be an answer. Sometimes there can't be an answer that's provided by the close of the audit. Then, like I said, it is a priority whenever you leave. It is a priority whenever you leave. So if you don't agree with the auditor's interpretation, let's have that conversation. Let's just say you don't agree with him. His interpretation doesn't match your interpretation. What is the first recourse or action? Open discussion. I have to choose the guy with the mask. If we have a disagreement with an auditor regulatorily, what would be your first recourse or action to take, in your opinion?
Contact the agency, kind of should know the higher ups in the agency.
Well, we're talking third party.
Okay.
Third party. So yeah. So, but yeah, that is very good. I like the route that you're going. And it is a route that we can go. So I'll take that as a yes. That's a good answer. There's still some other stuff that we can do. So you're saying contact the,
One thing I would want to know is it just this technician's opinion, or is that's the opinion of this whole group?
okay, good. And I agree with that. So the auditor that's got this issue and thinks this is a finding, we want to know whether or not is that his standing or is it his company standing, whether it be a Trinity or a Sage or Trihydro or whoever, right? EMSI, WH Consulting, Alliance, whoever's doing it, is this his stance? Is it their company stance, and where they're standing behind it, right? The second thing you want is there's strength in numbers, right? So is there any other pieces of information that support how you feel that aren't yours? ADIs, any type of audit thing that's been done, this recording? Is there anything you can get your hands on outside of you saying it that somebody else has said it? That don't you think that strengthens your case and lessens his case? Because he's should be looking for the same thing. And if you do have something, that's great. But if he don't have anything, that's also great. Because if he doesn't have something, it's better for you to ask, like, well, do you have something that supports your stance on this matter? Does somebody else support your view? Can you show me an ADI somewhere? And that ADI, it's difficult to navigate through, but once you figure out not to use too many words, and then how to narrow down from the ceiling words that you put, because you might get 200 pieces of hits, on the word that you're looking for. But if you put 2 words in and get a little bit more specific, you get no hits, but it's in there. There's an art to working through that stuff, because you can kind of read through some of the articles and you're like, okay, well, maybe I should say this. And you come up with different words that you want to use to get your evidence. And then once you have that, that should be enough. If he's not understanding after that, then that's going to be a problem. Yeah. If there cannot be an answer provided before the close of the audit, the actions or items are a priority. I said that. And then what happens when we don't agree and it's a different interpretation? We're going to try to break it down systematically. We have to have a plan, This post-audit stuff does require you to be your best devil's advocate. Everybody know what that means, to be a devil's advocate? Is that a bad thing? No. And in environmental, it is a necessity. It's a necessary thing. When we say be your best devil's advocate, you better make sure that you ask yourself every question. We had our executive team when we was with EMSI would love to watch Matthew Gobert and myself do this. So as we were trying to decide directions for the company or how we were going to do things, we often disagreed. And when we did disagree, then we would have to play it out, and sometimes I would win and sometimes I would lose. Sometimes he would win, sometimes he would lose. But the people watching us knew not to interrupt, because it was definitely a devil's advocate show, right? He basically thinks, oh, we shouldn't charge this client for this and blah, blah, blah. And if you said this to me, I would say such and such. And if you said this to me, then I would say such and okay, well, let's just play it out. And so then he pretends to be defending what he don't think is right, or yeah. And I'm defending what I think we should be doing. And it helped us make really, really good. I will tell you, after that exercise, we never made a bad decision. So don't be afraid to be your own worst devil's advocate. Ask yourself the tough questions, right? What could have been done better, regardless? Because you know what the bad thing is? The bad thing is when you go into those situations and you're like, man, the EPA came out here and they had these guys and they was doing all of this stuff and they were monitoring these valves for 5 minutes. I mean, anything can leak as we monitor for 5 minutes. That's not fair. It don't matter if it's fair or not. It don't even matter if, exactly. Yes. So there's no rule that says you can't monitor for 5 minutes. It gives you a minimum requirement, but it doesn't give you a maximum. You're not being a devil's advocate there. You have to really look at it. If you're trying to help yourself get prepared for what's coming, or you're trying to help yourself mitigate what happened, then you got to be better about it. What can we have done that's better? How can we do it better next time, right? How did your team respond? We chose a top 5, right? We had our top 5. We all chose our top 5. Audit comes out. How did we perform? Did we drop the ball? Did we fail? Did we fumble? Should we be fired? Should we be changed out? You got to ask yourself these tough questions, because guess what? It's not going to be your last audit. It's not going to be your last audit. There's another one coming at some point. And when you do particularly bad, your rotation probably goes up on the list. They're not going to say, oh, he didn't do that good on the audit. I mean, I understand in a third party situation, that's kind of rigid, like once every other year or something like that. But on the agency inspection, if they come in and check you out and it's kind of bad, yeah, you're probably going to see them again before too long. And it's probably going to be unannounced again. And a lot of times when they get ready to send you to FOV, if they want to put the nail in the coffin, then they'll visit the site before they send you the FOV from what you did a year ago, just to see what happened, which is why I tell you that the story is always being told, and it can be that long. But if you got all your documentation, you made all these changes, then you have a leg to stand on. You have a leg to stand on. You give your legal team something to work with. What corrective actions did you put in place that did not show up on the audit? What the hell am I talking about? Okay, so the audit is generally on the whole plant. Even if the EPA came in, do they look at the whole plant? I've never experienced it. Has anybody experienced them looking at the whole plant? No. But if they only looked at 3 units, maybe let's just be nice and conservative and say 5 units. They looked at 5 units. If you got 15 of them out there, 20 of them out there, they got 5 units they looked at and they found a bunch of problems in all 5 units. What corrective actions did you put into place that did not show up on the audit? That's important, because if you looked at 5 and you saw some problems, don't just act like the other 10 in your plant are good. They're probably bad. What they saw might not even be the worst ones. The worst ones might still be out there. And guess what? If you don't look, if you don't find out, you won't even know. So an audit might sometimes open your eyes up to, like, how good is my contractor really? Should this be the kind of stuff we should find in an audit? Don't think that, okay, we're good and we are lucky as auditors, but we are not that good and we are not that lucky. We're going to just happen to find the one place that they would have had all these tags that's not hung out in the field, or all these new pieces of equipment that didn't make it into the database. You're not that lucky. Check the rest of your stuff if that ends up happening to you. So LDAR audit must do number 4 is play chess, not checkers. What I mean by that, obviously, is that we want to make sure that we're sculpting this argument that we know that's going to happen. How do I play chess and not checkers? I know what my personality types are, the people on my program, right? I know, because I've already evaluated them. Actually, I don't work with anyone that doesn't take a personality test, period. Whether I'm working with you I'm hiring you, or I'm working with you to work with you. Even my clients, on the business, I do small business consulting in Atlanta. I would never take a client without knowing that. Now, I could sit in here and look at each one of you guys and have an idea of the major category you fall into in the top 4, but that is important to me because it teaches me how to be able to deal with you and how we can work successfully together and not clash, right? Or if there's clash opportunities, the certain personalities absolutely clash with others, how I go about avoiding that. If you don't know the personality types of the people you have in your staff, y'all are crazy. It only helps you to know that. It only helps you to know that. That's called playing chess and not checkers. Yep, we talked about this already because this is the controversial subject. And these are some LDAR things, like I said, that you may not know, but I don't want to. Y'all want to talk about the faux pas? The things that's been found that can destroy your LDAR program? All right, so we talked about the permit reviews. Review and double check your permit application calculate. Oh, yeah, so when you said you just was hired to pick up something, right? Like greenhouse gas report and everything, right? So you have a genealogy of some stuff that's been done that's not your work, right? And you kind of getting in and getting your feet acclimated and everything. Take it as an opportunity to look at all of this, because I could tell you that this one section right here, for this facility that I'm talking about, the facility was built in 1998. We had this issue in like 2012, 2010, 2012. And there was 3 different people that held that position. And how the 3 people held that position and nobody ever actually looked at that one point to realize that the calculations were off? Don't assume what we talked about earlier. We don't win when we make assumptions. I know it's a lot of work. Like, I know it's a lot of work to go back and build that case, right? But I generally don't even take new clients' facilities without building that case. Aaron and I worked together for a whole week in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we built a case. We had some, oh, what the hell? Nobody's doing this. And then we continue to read, and then we'll see a letter that gave them a exemption from having to do it 2 years later, which is why they're not doing it now. But we at least, nobody was going to tell us anything about this facility that we didn't already learn or figure out for ourselves, right? So that when we finally put our stamp on it and said, this is the program that needs to run for this thing to stay compliant, then we knew it based on everything, all information being included. We didn't assume that just because they were doing it this way, we're going to keep doing it that way. You can't admit that. Don't make those assumptions, because they can come back and haunt you. If you, like I said, this goes back to here. If you inherited somebody's work, then you got to check it. So sometimes it don't have to be LDAR related, because LDAR is like, man, it's like the thing that the people look at and they say, this is a big shiny thing that I can do something with, and it's low hanging fruit, right? But a lot of times it's not the LDAR program that caused the problem. So in this one situation, the consent decree came because a wastewater treatment plant had an open API. So everybody know what an API separator is? Basically, you got all this water in the plant, right? We use water for so much stuff, especially in a refinery. Like, it comes across so much different things, and then we're dropping it out because we want to get it out. So we separate the water out, but it's never just water. So at some point, we got to do something with this water. It's not enough to be product, but it's not enough to, be just clean water either. You're not going to drink it. So you send it to a place, and it gets to a place where it can sit and separate. We call that place the API separator. Sometimes we have DNFs or something like that before that help it want to separate, and you'll get like some solids and some other stuff out of it. But essentially, we still want to get to a place where we allow the oil, entrained oil from the entire plant, to separate from the water, because if you leave it together long enough, it'll separate, right? Technically, that shouldn't be open. Last time I checked, the water's on the bottom. Every time I look at this and you let it sit there, water's on the bottom, oil's on the top. Anybody disagree? So if I have a API open oil water separator, what the hell is on top? The oil. And what is the oil? The oil from the entire plant. So when the EPA saw this, there was a strike one and then a explosion, like, you're done. Strike one is the meter readings were 150, 200, which is not a 500 leak, or back then the leak definition was 10,000. But when they looked at it from a benzene standpoint, they were over the permissible exposure limit. So that meant that they just put in harm's way any of their operators, any of the people who had worked in that area. That's a problem. That wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing is that when they examined the API separator, there was a crack in it. And now that liquid was leaking into the soil, and that's really, okay. LDAR what? Like, now you didn't see in the media that this was kind of a thing. You saw the consent decree, that's what was lodged, and they're doing this whole new program, and they agreed to all this other stuff. They also had to fix that, right? They did have to fix it. It was a $25 million project, and to early 2000s, middle 2008, 2012, something like that. But in any event, you don't see all that stuff. You just saw the LDAR program, and then you instantly kind of think, oh, the LDAR program was a bad thing. The faulty incinerator. So incinerators are supposed to operate at a certain BTU level so that it actually combusts the VOCs or whatever it is that we're sending to it, right? And that's under regulatory requirement. And generally, Aaron, I think that number is 95%. I always confuse it between 95 and 98. 95% efficiency, right? So this particular incinerator was operating probably somewhere in the 80s, if. And so when you do the calculation on what it didn't combust, that it let it out to the atmosphere over a, base, even if you just did it for the rest of that year or a 2-year period of time or whatever, the number was astronomical. Now, when they did the audit on the LDAR program, even though they had a lot of loopholes or a lot of holes in the LDAR program, there was no difference in the leak percentages. So the leak percentages that the US EPA found versus the leak percentages that they found were relatively the same, but they still pushed for a enhanced LDAR program, consent decree, and the whole reason why they had it was because of that faulty incinerator. The incinerator wouldn't have been there. I mean, of course, obviously they fixed the incinerator, but they still made them do the LDAR program. Gross miscount of components on the permit. So sometimes, sometimes you got to be careful who you give the job to, right? So if you tell someone, oh, we just need to count these components, and you give them this much of the job without giving them the whole purpose of what they're trying to accomplish. I'm a strong believer in giving them some people don't want to know that, like your goals I was talking about earlier, like the cross T's and dot I's and check boxes and those things. They're more like, okay, this is assignment. He told me to do this, and he's not going to kind of inquire about it anymore. But the scientific guy is probably going to be, well, why am I doing this? And because he's trying to see what the goal is, because instantly he's probably trying to, or she is trying to think of a way to do it more efficiently. But when you halfway given an assignment for something so important as how many components I have in this unit, because I got to add that number to a calculation on emissions so I can see how many emissions I have in the unit, potential emissions I have in the unit. Then I got to build a permit based upon covering that amount. And I have credits that I have to be able to get now these days. And if I mess that up, but the person that was counting was basically like a technician, not saying technicians can't count, but you got to give them the right criteria. And without the right criteria, he counted without good instructions and was way off on the number sequence. And then add insult to injury, the number sequence was off by thousands of components, and the calculations were off. Even if the numbers would have been right, the calculations were still wrong. They didn't use the right factors. So that was 2 negatives. And that was a permitting issue, right? And yeah, they ended up in the consent decree.
Another one for the permitting is even if your counts are right, verifying that you have the correct permit provisions for the control efficiencies actually have listed it. Came across where they used a 97% control efficiency for their connectors.
Yeah.
They were monitoring all of their connectors for it, but they had an annual permit provision written into the permit.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it's notated, they had to do it annually. Calculations said that they were quarterly.
Right. Which is
They
bad.
verified it.
Mm-hmm. So I think if you take anything from this, just take that part of understanding where you're going to be in an audit is knowing what all you got. So when you step into it, it's not okay to be like, well, this is how they was doing it, so this is how I'm gonna do it. Like you want to ask a few more questions, and it takes a little bit more time, And sometimes if you don't have the time for it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to happen. Maybe you can find the money for it and have that research done. It'd be great to dot that I across that T from that standpoint, and to just keep walking blindly, because once they start peeling back the covers, they see stuff, they just keep going to more and more covers, right? So when it's all said and done, successfully managing an audit is about accurate knowledge of your litigation risks. That's if you're dealing with an agency, and your compliance exposure if you're dealing with a third-party audit. Accurate knowledge of your litigation risk or compliance exposure. Every time I've had an audit, I knew I had problems but I feel like I knew where those problems were. Another reason why I would be shaking in my boots, right? So we knew there's units that we didn't want them to go into, and we knew there was units that we would feel really good if they went to those units, right? And that's the things that you're trying to cure. In LDAR, there's always going to be something, right? Generally, there's always going to be something. We also learned from our conversation with you today that even if you were successful at making it not be something, it doesn't give you credit. It only discredits the guy who did the audit. It doesn't give you more credit, right? So, but you have to know where your holes are, right? Because that's how you protect yourself and you defend yourself. And there's been times where, we draw the boundaries of the units up for the guy to make sure that he stays within these areas, because and you'll say stuff like, oh, if you go over there, we got to get a new permit to do such and such. So this is our area. I'm not lying to him. I'm telling him what the right area is, but we make sure and we know if he were to go over there, they just did a bunch of stuff and we couldn't fix it all before the thing because nobody gave us the MOCs, and the stories can go on and on and on of why you're in those situations. But knowing what your risks are is important. So it's about being honest with your LDAR program and being your own best devil's advocate. Be tough on yourself. Ask yourself the questions. Be tough on your people. Make sure you know what they're going to be. So when I start these relationships, I literally tell people, I hate for you to just trust me right off the bat. It doesn't do me any good. It doesn't help me if you just trust me. I prefer to earn your trust, and this is why. If you send me through the fire and you don't believe what I'm telling you, you make me prove out what I'm doing, you will build with me a level of confidence that comes from something that is solid and concrete. If you just give it to me, the first whimsical, crazy little thing or somebody else that comes along and says something different, you're going to be shaken because it wasn't built on anything. My strongest relationships with people that I do business with as a client, they're being my client, have been rocky, tough, rough. And I like that whole process because I know what it's going to be in the end. At the end of the day, I know, but I know I'm a good guy, right? So I know I'm a good guy. And I know you're going to get to that conclusion. So it doesn't matter to me how many hoops I have to jump through, how many things I got to go around, because I feel like we're going to be in the same place at the end anyway, But I know if we do that, we have established a really rock solid relationship. So in your situation, you want to be able to do the same thing, be your own best devil's advocate, send the person through the fire. Don't be afraid to do that because you get a better level of confidence with them at the end. And I know someone's going to come, man, I've got to do work the dog. He does bad work and you can't trust him as far as you can see him. You got evidence and evidence and evidence of your own personal experience with this guy that doesn't allow this person to influence you like that. It's about defending what you did right, correcting what you did wrong, and telling the right story. So, as I told you earlier, I was talking about rule bending. It's the ability to be able to say, yeah, we shouldn't have did it this way, but it's not exactly wrong. I'll give you an example. We had to add 300 components in a unit because we didn't have them tagged and we should have had them tagged, right? It's a Title V plant, so I have to report the fact that I added those 300 components, right? So I know that I got to report the fact that I had the 300 components, but the question comes into, why did I add these 300 components? So I'm going to acknowledge the fact that they should have been added, and I turn in on the report, we added 300 components, and my reason was, we reclassified these streams and decided to take a stringent approach and added them to the LDAR program. All stuff that's true. But the EPA, when they look at it, they're like, oh, okay, they don't think you missed these for the last 20 years and it wasn't in your program. They understand that you reclassified them and you did 2 consecutive months on them and you added them to the program and you've taken a more stringent approach on your definition. That helps you, right? So, and you haven't done anything wrong. You passed the red-face test, and if they ask you the questions, you honestly answer the questions. Like if they ask me how long it's been out there, but that's not a requirement on my Title V deviation report. It wants to know what you had missing. What's missing? That's what's changed in your program. Why did it change? Those are the kind of things that you kind of do when you're correcting what is you're defending what you did right, correcting what you did wrong, and then how are you telling the story about it? It all makes a difference. remember, it is not what the EPA believe as much as what they can prove. Because at the end of the day, you are not telling that story to an enforcement agent. You're not trying to overly convince him. I mean, we are telling him that story, but whether he believes it or not isn't as important as what happens after he leaves. Because the people that we're talking to after that point, those are the ones that write the fines. Those are the ones that, I mean, when I was with DOJ, we had almost got everything done. And they're like, well, we're okay. And he's like, well, how, he was asking me like, well, how much you think we were off on such and such, and about economic benefit, and I was going to try to answer the question, and I can't remember this lady's name, but she was such a tenacious thing, and she was very impressive to watch, right? And she stopped my hand and grabbed the pen, and she looked at the pharmaceutical company that was across the table for us, and she said, at the end of the day, you just need to wrap around your head that you're going to have to pay us some more money. I was like, whoa. Whoa. Like all that's said and done, whatever, and the gravity of this situation is going to cost you, and if we're not there, then we need to talk about nothing else. And I'm like, yeah. So at the end of the day, that same lady was 28 LDAR violations I was telling you about. She knocked like 12 of them off because she didn't want to go through trying to prove it. And they was some legit stuff. And she's like, don't worry about those. Just focus on these, because these I can prove. These, they don't stand a chance. But, like she was completely looking at litigation risks. Now, when they were out there, you can argue till you blue in the face with this guy on the 28 LDAR violations. And at the end of the day, we only was talking about 12. And yes, even though we won and everything was good on that side from the DOJ's perspective, that company still didn't end up with a consent decree. So that does make a difference, right? With the third-party auditor, you want to remember it's not about what the third-party auditor believes as much as it is about what he can prove regulatorily. The burden of proof in this situation is on them, the third party. They got to show you in the regulations why this is a finding. If you don't make them do that, then you're letting them get off really easy. And I feel like this whole presentation I've given you today, I'm kind of doing like a us versus them kind of thing, and I don't really want you to feel that way. That's why I keep saying we got to be cooperative but inquisitive. But in these situations, when the line is drawn in the sand and I'm on this side and you're on that side, then at that point you have to play your cards, because you have to protect your interest. And that's the company that you work for, that's you and your personality and your reputation. All those things are kind of coming online. So that burden of proof is on them. They need to show you in the regulations why they think it's a finding. You don't need to show them in the regulations why it is not. That will be a wrap. This is reading and interpreting regulations to kind of help get us to that, but I was going to have it here if I got through this stuff too quick, but you guys are a great audience to deal with. So I don't have anything else to offer unless you guys want to talk about regulations. I'd be happy to talk about it. Sounds like we had a good day. So, any tips or comments that we could do better next time around? What makes you guys come back? That's what I want to know. That's what I'll do. Good for you? Is good for you? Would you change anything? Constructive criticism, I promise I can take it. I had to have thick skin since I was 6. Yes.
You like kind of keep that thing, like,
Mm-hmm.
what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Could happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Good, good. Any constructive criticism from me, sir?
No, I probably took notes on this and I have.
Really? Thank you. Sound like it would have came in handy a couple of years ago. Agency or third party? Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, as I said, always, if there was just one of you guys in here, I would have still been just as happy. So I really am very appreciative of the opportunity to expand knowledge and just participate in this whole thing. So thank you guys very much. And I am going to go find my wife and Get a margarita.
Nice.
She probably already started without me.
She probably.
There's supposed to be a hamburger place, basically right across the road.
It has good margaritas.
Margaritas, but the best hamburger. I think all they serve is hamburger.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna tell her about that.
Well, no, I'm asking where is it?
Oh. Well, the,
I know.
yeah, so I think he's talking about moonshine.
Yeah, right
Yeah.
on City Street.
Mm-hmm.
Moonshine?
It's down, I think it's, yeah, moonshine.
Moonshine, I know where that is.
Okay, I thought moonshine was a burger place.
I don't know. Probst was talking about one that he said best burgers you've ever had.
Wow. We might have to ask the concierge downstairs. I would hate to tell you the wrong thing. So. Concierge downstairs, she got you, or he.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Just have to stop this recording.
Next week.
So this was very timely then, huh?